Sorry. No, Tim's here.
See, nobody recognizes me.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for April 11th, 2023. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Carsbeck.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Here.
Trustee Ayers.
Here.
Trustee Sorcelli and Trustee Butler are not present.
Okay, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is a chance for anyone to speak to something that is not on tonight's agenda. We don't have, oh yes, we have 3 signed up. Okay, so 2 of these are gonna be pickleball, and we're gonna have that open for discussion tonight. And then Caretakers presentation, and that'll also be on the agenda, so there'll be an opportunity there too. Is there anyone else that would wish to speak that did not have a chance to sign up? Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to our regular items tonight. We'll start out with consent. Would trustees like anything removed from consent?
I would like the resolution removed for discussion.
Okay, we'll have resolution F removed. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve consent minus item F?
I'll say, yeah.
I will so move.
Okay, trustee Ayers has moved, trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Mayor Carsbeck.
Yes. All right, consent has been approved minus item F, and items removed from consent will be considered next. So we have resolution 2023-06, and this is opposing the state Senate Bill 23-213, Senate Bill 23-213, excuse me. Did you?
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to get a little bit more discussion on this because generally I'm in favor. However, I've talked to people who are not in favor of who are in favor of the bill as opposed to not. And I can kind of see both sides of the issue. I'm rather concerned generally when state mandates start trickling down into the municipalities, especially since that's not the way Colorado generally works, and it's also taking a lot of our control of our development out of our own hands, which I think is rather problematic. I was just wondering if anybody had any specific thoughts one way or another, since I haven't, gotten a chance really to talk to.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I appreciate you pulling it, I think it's totally fair. I know trustee Murphy and trustee Butler both wrote in testimonials, and then I waited on Thursday, a little 9 hours to speak on the phone, so I vocally did mine. But you're right, there's good, I mean, it's a tricky thing, cause it is really appealing in some aspects, having more affordability or the allure of more affordability, but to me, it was kind of, just like you said, the state kind of going in there saying, you're gonna have to do this. The idea of potentially having, I don't wanna say zoning go away, but the ability for them to kind of dictate where or how much housing you can have in a certain area where we might not want to have as much housing. So that's kind of where I stand, and CML has made a really strong push, and for the audience, that's the Colorado Municipal League, that's kind of our lobbying and education organization, has made a real strong push to oppose this as well, and they're citing some kind of vagary in it too, even though it is 110 pages long, so it's rather specific in some
Cliff
aspects.
notes defining what Senate bill is, for those that don't know what it is.
Was that?
Do you have a good 30-second commercial for what the Senate bill is? I don't think a lot of people might know what it is.
I don't have it off the top of my head. We got the resolution right there.
Cliff's notes, so anyway.
I can give you a handful of just high level details if that's.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
SB 23-213 is a land use bill that was introduced. And it does a handful of things. One, it only applies to municipalities, and it applies to different municipalities in different ways. There are categories of municipalities created, and then some strategies for how to deal with land use and housing that are imposed by the state on local municipalities. I think so one, it grants some pretty broad regulatory authority to the Department of Local Affairs, or DOLA, and they're granted that authority to modify some statutory minimum standards that apply to things like accessory dwelling units and housing and transit-oriented development. And DOLA really wasn't created to serve in that function, I don't think. At least that's certainly CML's suggestion. It requires some housing needs assessments be conducted, and so some high-level housing plans. It creates some reporting standards for municipalities. They have to collect, track, and maintain and report to DOLA a fairly significant amount of data, starting in 2026 about different housing in their communities, their housing plans, and a whole host of other issues. It makes some land use types use by right, which takes away some review authority from local municipalities that might treat some of those land uses as a use by special review. It gives the town board the opportunity to review those types of land uses on a case-by-case basis and apply reasonable conditions to those projects to ensure that they don't create a negative impact on their surrounding land uses. Let's see what else. I'm trying to breeze through the fairly long
And,
summary here.
Administrator Kirk, it's my understanding that we're generally following what guidelines would have been or would possibly be set by this bill anyway.
There is some truth in some instances, right? So one of the things that the land use bill does is it makes accessory dwelling units used by right in residential zones. Our code already allows accessory dwelling units as use by right in all residential zones. So like there are some of those provisions that we've already dealt with.
But we could have an HOA ban that currently, right?
Well, so
So Heritage Ridge can't just put it in as a use by right now.
it depends on what the covenants in their subdivision require. So we might say that's okay, their covenants might say that's not, and they still are bound by the covenants that they agreed to when they bought their home.
Right.
Generally within the context of whatever architectural review process is required through their own HOA or metro district.
But this bill would override that.
It generally says these have to be allowed, as I understand it.
Going forward.
Going forward, yeah. You know, we don't currently have a housing needs assessment and a housing plan. We haven't adopted one because we haven't gone through the process of doing that evaluation because we already have a pretty forward-thinking housing and land use policy. As you guys know, we've made a lot of adjustments to the code to allow for smaller dwelling unit types, to require a mix of land uses within subdivisions. They can no longer be only single-family development. There has to be a variety of other housing types included depending on the size of the subdivision. So there are things that we're already doing that generally jive with this. I think the big concern from CML is that what the state is doing is saying there's a one-size-fits-all approach for every community. And I think that historically, and I think CML and other municipalities that are opposing this bill are concerned about the state's reach and imposition of a one-size-fits-all solution where land use has historically been they use a scalpel rather than a hammer, right? And communities have the ability to address housing concerns that are unique to their community with unique strategies that work for their community. In this case, I think the concern is that the state is starting to overreach into areas that have historically been municipal affairs. So I think that's a big part of the concern, and I think practically speaking for the town of Berthoud, and you guys know I'm not, I don't get a vote, so that not my personal opinion's irrelevant, but I think practically speaking, the concern from CML, and I think one of the reasons why they're asking us to oppose the bill as a member of CML and why it may make sense for you to do that is to say, look, land use and housing has historically and should continue to be a local affair, and it should be dealt with locally so that we can create the solutions that work and that our community wants, rather than saying you shall do the following statewide regardless of your own community's needs or wants.
Yeah, I think it's a fair overview. It seemed that there's a tier 1 and tier 2, and Berthoud's listed as a tier 2 community between, was it 10 and 25,000 or something like that?
Yeah,
So
5 and
the
25.
only thing that really applies to us right now is the accessory dwelling units as a use by right. Once you get over 25,000, then stuff like duplexes and triplexes are used by right seems to be in any location. Transit-oriented developments are encouraged. one of my points in my speech was, you know, you could, we're all for transit-oriented developments, but the state has to get in there and tell us we're getting a train stop or we're getting rail, otherwise we're just packing stuff. And then there was a big push that this is gonna reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and which I think in most cases is true, but in a place like Berthoud, having more people does not necessarily mean suddenly there's gonna be a local workforce and local jobs. So having more people could just mean more people on the road going to Denver, so we could have the opposite greenhouse gas effect for us. And I just want to say those that were on the phone opposing, which was a significant amount of municipalities, there's town administrators, city managers, mayors, some counties spoke up just to help out the municipalities, local water districts, because the state will be kind of looking into all of our water now, and have the ability to kind of take a statewide accounting on that, which they've never been able to do before. And CML has a fear that this is just the start of another bill that kind of takes water out of our hands too. But I just wanted to say, those that were opposing, I think there was a very strong majority of us saying there's a lot of good stuff in this bill. Let's just restructure it and come to the municipalities and let's work this out on an individual, basically come to Berthoud and look at this. How can we do this in Berthoud? But just kind of that, like Chris said, that one size fits all seem to be where there's a lot of frustration, or at least that's where I feel too.
And just to add to that, I think Mayor Carspeck and Administrator Kirk, you guys summed it up really well. We are for affordable housing. I've been working for it as long as I've been an architect and served on the planning commission, and I hope we continue to commit ourselves to pursuing affordable strategies. But this bill basically takes a sledgehammer to the problem, where, as in the past, we've had very targeted precision, actions regarding density, regarding locating these developments in a way that makes sense for our town. And that would largely be taken away by this bill and be coming down from the state legislature. I think the main thrust is that citizens and their local governments know best how to solve this problem first on the ground with targeted solutions for their individual communities. So I think that's kind of the thrust of, in principle, this bill has a lot of good things, but the execution is extremely poor in my opinion. So, yeah.
Other thoughts? Questions?
Yeah, like I said, I'm in favor of the resolution. I just
Oh yeah,
wanna make
no,
sure
I'm
there
glad
was
you pulled it
final
too. Yeah,
discussion.
because
It's a good discussion.
thank you for doing that. All right, if there's nothing else, would anyone like to move on? I'm on the wrong page here. Senate Bill, our resolution of the town of Berthoud in opposition of the statewide land use and zoning preemptions in Senate Bill 23-213.
So moved.
All right, Trustee Hardy has moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Murphy has seconded. Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes,
Mayor Carspeck.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Trustee Ayers. Next on our agenda is Harvest 47 preliminary plat. This is a public hearing continuance, same with the Bader minor subdivision. I'll turn these both over to Administrator Kirk to explain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Carspeck. Unfortunately, on March 23rd, the Planning Commission did not have a quorum and was unable to hear the application for the Harvest 47 preliminary plat. Same was essentially true for the excuse me, the Bader PUD amendment, although that one, the applicant also requested a continuance. And I apologize, you mentioned them both. Is it okay if
My
I
fault. It
address
was
them
my
both
fault.
at the same time?
What?
And is it okay if I address them both
I
at the
think
same
so,
time?
yeah.
You guys can
I
vote
didn't mean to
that
do that.
individually. So because the planning commission didn't have a quorum, they weren't able to hear the preliminary plat request and make a recommendation to the board on that preliminary plat. We need to continue that hearing. The planning commission hearing was continued to April 27th, 2023. And so we would request for the Harvest 47 preliminary plat that the board continue its hearing that would have been scheduled tonight until May 9th. On the Bader PUD amendment, the request is that the board continue the hearing until May 23rd, 2023.
Thank you. Trustees, is there any questions about this? We kind of went through a similar issue last time, not because of planning and zoning. Cool. All right, was there, let's start with the Harvest 47 preliminary plat. Is there a motion to continue?
Sure. I'll move to approve the Harvest 47. Continues to May 9th, 2023, Town Board Trustees meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Trustee Hardy has moved on this. Trustee Ayers has seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Mayor Korsberg.
Yes. All right, next is the Bader Minor subdivision. Is there a motion on that?
Yep, I'll move to approve the Bader Minor Subdivision Plan Unit Development and Overall Development Plan Amendment and Final Development Plan Continuance to May 23rd, 2023.
Thank you.
Town Board Trustee meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Trustee Hardy has moved on this. Mayor Pro Tem Grace has seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote on that. Thank you.
Trustee Ayers.
Yes.
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Mayor Korsberg.
Yes. Next is a fee waiver request from the Caretakers of Tradition, which is a group of former firefighters and as advocates of our fire district, and they've come to present to us. And we have, I'll turn it over to Administrator Kirk.
Thank you, Mayor Karsbeck. I won't take a lot of time. I'll let them make their presentation, so I won't scoop them on their request. Town staff has met with the Caretakers of Tradition, and we would support their request under the belief that a fee waiver, which they will request for you tonight for some construction they'd like to do, supports both our community identity, which is a stated touch point of the town board. It preserves history, and preserving that history and strengthening our community identity has a real economic benefit in terms of maintaining the type of community that we are and that is desirable. And so we feel like there's a reasonable economic justification to do this. And I'll just turn it over to them for their presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us tonight. Mr. Mayor, trustees, Mr. Town Administrator. My name is Paul Rimsky. I represent the Caretakers of Tradition as the president of the organization. We're a group that was formed in 2018, formed a nonprofit. We're retired and alumni firefighters, having anywhere from 15 years to 32 years. To give you a list from our board of directors, myself, I've got 15 years. Jerry Ward has 18, Pete Cowden has 17, John Beck has 32, Lee Scott, who was very instrumental in getting this group started and put together, had 18. Along with Mr. Erickson's 25 years as a volunteer firefighter, he also had 25 years as a director for the Berthoud Fire District. So all told, firefighting years of experience, we had 125 years between those 6 gentlemen. Again, back to 2018, we formed our 501c3 group. We wanted to start on some projects. We knew that, as you see the hose cart there, it's kind of an artist rendition of it. It was in pretty sorry shape. It needed a lot of work. We needed to do a number of things to it to get it back into good working order. With the help of Lee Scott, and unfortunately, he passed away in 2020. But he left us a very nice nest egg to get the organization up and on its feet and going. Lee was extremely instrumental in becoming the fire district historian, collecting anything fire related he could get his hands on. Initially, it didn't matter whether it came from Berthoud or where it came from, it had a value to Lee, which meant it had a value to us as far as former firefighters. He started putting together a very nice display case in the fire station. That is now morphed into, we want to build a building that essentially, to paraphrase it, I guess it's essentially a nice 2-car garage. It's going to be added on to the south end of Fire Station 1. It will face Welch Avenue. And with any luck, we'll be able to start in the spring of this year. See if I can do this. As Administrator Kirk pointed out, on March 30th, we scheduled a meeting with him. went in, had a very nice conversation, shared with him who we were, what we were about, what we were trying to do. We really want to preserve the history of the volunteer firefighter and the firefighting service here in Berthoud. We have these two pieces of equipment which really are community treasures. The 1888 hose cart, which was originally purchased by the town of Berthoud, was delivered in 1889. And then the 1927 Julius Pierce GMC pumper that was built in Denver. So in that letter, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through it, we ask for consideration of waiving all fees and for inspection and permitting to build this building. We're trying to do this by fundraising. We've started a campaign to talk with a lot of folks in the construction trade to see if they would be interested in supporting us by way of materials, labor, time, whatever they could donate to us. To date, we've got donations that we estimate to be in the neighborhood of about $130,000. To build the building, we're estimating it's going to cost about $200,000. The balance of that we're still working on covering, and I'll get into more of the details of what we're missing in a little bit, but we've got the cash to cover that. So we feel we're in a good spot to move forward there. The conversation with Administrator Kirk went very well. He was very supportive and offered his support in waiving those fees. So hopefully you folks will have a similar feel for us. Three areas that are really our mission statement: preservation, restoration, and education. Preservation first in those historical artifacts, those two treasures that have been moved around to so many different storage sheds in the county and sometimes out of the county. We want them to be someplace where everybody can see them and really have an appreciation of, wow, that's what grandpa or great grandpa may have rode upon one time in the distant past. The restoration, to restore those two pieces, you'll see a picture in a moment of the hose cart as it looked in 1889. You'll see how it looked in 2022. We spent about $25,000 on the hose cart, had to have new wheels manufactured for it. Finding an individual that could do that work for us was very difficult. We thought we were gonna have to go to Amish country just to get the wheels made for the unit. We were that at our wits' end. As far as education, we have a two-pronged approach that we want there. We want to be able to show the young people in the community, the grade school kids, during Fire Prevention Week, here's what it used to be like to ride on a fire truck. Here's what it used to be like, to pull a hose cart through town. And then in the next breath, take them down to the other end of the fire station and go, and here's some of the equipment they use today. And the big difference that they see in that. The other piece that we want to do with that is after we get this building completed, we want to continue our fundraising efforts. We want to start a scholarship for young men and women in the Berthoud community that have an interest in firefighting in the EMS field. We want to be able to support them by giving them a scholarship that will pay for that fire academy, pay for that EMT training, so they can be on their way to being a member of a firefighting service or EMS service in a local community. Okay, where did I love it when that happens.
Look at those mustaches.
There we go. Okay. It's been a few years since I retired, so bear with me.
Which one's you?
Pete is actually, and we do this all the time, we pick on each other, so that Pete is the short one in the back. At any rate, that's what it looked like in 1889. That's standing out in front of the old Berthoud National Bank. Okay. Let's see, where am I at here? That is what it looked like after we got done with it last year. Can't tell you how proud we are of that. And just so we don't wear the wheels out on it, we bought it's essentially a U-Haul trailer that you would pull the front end of a vehicle on, modified it so that we can tow that around, take it to parades and shows and so forth. So we're extremely proud of how that turned out. The other, back. The other piece is the 1927 Julius Pierce. This was the first motorized fire apparatus that the town of Berthoud had. Again, we're extremely proud of it. We did a significant restoration on it just prior to the centennial in 1988. We spent about $25,000 on it then. Again, because it's been moved around and stored in so many out-of-the-way places and that, it sustained a little bit of damage. So we had to have the dings taken out of some fenders. We had to redo some of the running boards and have some paint redone. So we've spent about another $4,000 on it to get it where it's at. We had a gentleman come down from Wyoming to do the gold leaf lettering on that. Used to be, you could go to the phone book to find those guys. Now you gotta find somebody who knows somebody at an apartment somewhere. The guy that did this for us does all of Denver Fire's trucks. So it turned out extremely nice. We're very happy with it. Finally, onto the building. This is a artist draft of what the building would look like with our input, of course. We want the block and so forth on it, on the exterior, to match the existing building so that it doesn't look like it doesn't belong. The garage door, we want to have interior lighting so that at night, as citizens drive by, they're on their evening walk, there's a little bit of a glow in there so they can see the two pieces of equipment sitting in there. We've got a lot of windows on the west side also, some windows up high on the east. Our thought is we hope it doesn't get too warm in there because of all the windows that we have.
Greenhouse.
Yes.
Exactly. And then finally, we've got a list, 2 pages here of the construction disciplines, if you will, everything from architect to trusses for the roof and the roofing that have volunteered and donated time, money, materials to help us to build this building. Right now, and going to the last page, if I can get there, under item G there, you can see the remaining trades and cost required. So floor ceiling, gutters and downspouts, interior truss and window frame painting, glass for the entry door on the west side, signage, the fire district is going to take care of that, insurance and bonding for covering us during the project, electric heating units that would be installed later, just in case we have another winter like we just went through, and then fire alarm detection system tie-in. Please keep in mind that while we're doing all this, while the fire district is supporting us in our efforts, they are not supporting us monetarily. We are not getting a nickel of fire district tax money, so there is no tax money going into this. This is all our fundraising and so forth. Can I answer any questions for anyone?
Thank you, Mr. Ramsky. Excellent. Trustees, any questions?
I just want to thank you for the thorough and comprehensive presentation, and I fully support it.
Thank you.
Only question I have is actually regards to the scholarship for fire and EMT training. How many people do you anticipate per year once that kind of gets established?
That's an excellent question, and we haven't gone into the schools yet to find out exactly how many young people may be interested in getting into that field. We know from the fire district's point of view, they've got young people coming to them all the time. So the district's kind of footing the bill for that right now. It's a very competitive field out there, but at the same time, there's a whole lot of jobs. It's like any other thing where there's always a shingle out that they're hiring. So I just saw that they posted here just this past week that they're gonna be hiring again.
Okay.
So I think there's the need, and I think if some young people have an opportunity to explore the careers there, I think they'll find it's a very rewarding career to get into.
Absolutely. That's the only question I had. I fully support this. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's great. It's neat to see the list of names you named off because a lot of them were
You know 'em.
neighbors, I mean, you're a neighbor,
Yep.
you were a neighbor.
Yeah,
I
you
live
know
across the
'em.
street from John.
Coaches,
Yeah, coaches, you know,
former trustees.
growing up with all this equipment and being knocked over after the police chief contest. Because the fireman thought it was funny to full power on the hose line.
Yeah.
But, yeah, lots of memories with the fire department in town, so fully support the history.
Thank you.
Likewise, yeah, and seeing this from the start and being able to see both the cart and the truck in person, it's incredible what you guys have done in this amount of time, and this will be around for a long time. And really excited to see this just come about so quickly. And this means a lot to me, and I think it'll mean a lot to the community as well.
I do too. Thank you very much for your support.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else, trustees? Anyone would like to move on this?
I move to approve the Caretakers or Tradition building permit fee waiver request.
I'll second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this. Trustee Hardy is seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Tim Grace,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsberg.
Yes. Congratulations, and thank you very much, Mr. Rifkin and Caretakers. Okay, we can move on now to the 2023 Pickleball Court Project Bid Award, and this is by our Deputy Town Administrator, Jeremy Olinger. Welcome. Did that wrong? Go far. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Trustees, tonight's item before you is the project bid award for pickleball. It's been before you in numerous phases, but the bid went out just to refresh your memory. Location of where this is going, just south of the basketball courts over at Wagner Farm Park. Just west of the athletic fields there on the south portion of the northwest corner, where the Parkway and Bunyan. The concept we started with back in March is on the right there, 8 pickleball courts, fencing, shelter, or excuse me, shed, maintenance shed, and crushed refined trail around, and some benches. We went to last year, we worked on with the consultant with Wink, developing the construction documents. We took it back to Port a couple times, got input from them, community members, as well as the pickleball club, other community members that saw it on Port and things like that, and there were some additions that we added prior to going out to bid from that input. Some of those are listed on the side. A lot had to do with benches and some shade benches and putting fencing in between the courts, expanding courtyard and the picnic pavilion, things like that. Concrete sidewalks all the way around. This project did, during the construction documents, we didn't know for sure, but it did end up requiring a retaining wall down on the southeast corner. So that's of note, because you'll see the next page as the bids came in. So as the bid came in, the end of March, we had a construction cost estimate when we put this to our engineers of $790,000 last year, prior with the original design concept prior to going through the year. We had 2 bids. The parent low bid was ECI site construction at just under 1.5. As you see there was a low bid, roughly $300,000 less than the next bid. There's some added cost as we work through this, bringing power to the site with Excel. We can't bring it from the rec center. We have to bring it from the east side of the property. Then there's some added costs in there, and that's shown on the list there. And also as well as construction services with Baseline Engineering. That's our internal construction firm that we've hired this year and in the past. So as it stands with the bid and things, the total construction cost, including the 5% contingency, as you see, is just over 1.6 million. As we work through this, we understand that staff understand that it's over our current budget. We took a look at the bids and the bid and the design. There's some things that staff that we'd like to recommend that we could omit to get that price down, that bid down, work with the contractor to get it more in line with the original construction cost. Still providing the courts, still providing the amenity. A lot has to do with court lighting. As staff work through this, we don't defensible argument or justification of lighting at night at that site. And then there's some concrete that can be amended, some benches, some site amenities that are maybe priced a little higher than our standard or our minimum standard that we could maybe trade out. Those are roughly, we're estimating around 300,000 that we could omit from this project. So with that, it goes down to 1.3. Our budget for this year was 890,000. So moving forward, flipping the page, if we do the omissions, our new project expenses are 1.3, 27 there. We would ask for a new requested budget of 1.35. You'll see that we, in the Larimer County Open Space Fund, we do have that money budget this year, that 850. We would get the other 500,000 that we need to reach the 1.35 out of the Public Facilities Fund of 100,000 and the Park Development Fund of 400,000. And then we just put down on here what those remaining funds will be at the bottom if we take that money from those for this current year, what that leaves us. That's good, yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Questions?
Yes.
I'm trying to see hard.
Well, we've all seen pickleball has been making the news a lot lately
Yeah.
with news or of noise. So has there been any consideration of any sort of noise barriers being put on the east side of the courts to kind of try and deflect that and keep it on the grounds and not having it going east towards the housing over there on Franklin and
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit as we researched, other cities, other towns, other projects about noise reductions and things and what they were doing. A couple things that came out of it was to wait, mainly because there's new equipment that's come out that's starting to, the paddles and things are absorbing some of that sound. And we didn't know if there was gonna be an issue yet. We know the sound travels and we just don't know how it's going to reverberate into the community yet. So we don't know if that's something we need to do yet. So we just want to wait a little bit to see if we got some feedback from the neighbors if it was gonna be an issue. But yes, we did talk about it.
by Xing the lighting initially too, that probably help with at least the late night clicking sounds.
Yeah, yep.
So my question is regarding the lighting. Administrator Kirk, when we talked about this last week, I understand the pickleball specific lighting is probably what's might be jacking this up, but you've mentioned maybe that the alternative would be just parking lot lighting?
Well, we talked about the potential for parking lot lighting. I think the way that we designed the system was to be controllable by users as well, right? So they're not on all the time. So if they would either dim or shut off and just leave a couple of security lights on, then they could be activated with a button or a timer so that you could play, and then they'd shut off again so they're not on all night long at their full power. Some of that expense is associated with that sport court lighting, which is a little different. That sport court lighting is a little more diffuse too, right? It doesn't create the same kind of glare. The lights are a little different. They are expensive light pole standards. Like I think they're $16,000 a piece for the lights, and that is more expensive than like what we would typically install in like a parking lot. I think there is some sense to eliminating playable lighting. We would still want to have some security lighting out there regardless, because it's never great to have dark spots in the park to where at least where you can generally avoid them. So we'd want to have some security lighting out there. We're still going to want to install conduit so that when and if the town wants to install that sport court lighting, that it's all all the underground infrastructure is already there. We don't have to tear anything up to do it. So there would still be some expense associated with the electrical portion of the contract. It just wouldn't be the total amount. I think generally we as staff would support eliminating the sport court lighting, keeping some security lighting, and then installing the infrastructure to put in the right kind of lighting when and if the board wanted to do that, rather than put in a less expensive light that may or may not function as well as we wanted it to, and may not cover, the lighting is designed to cover all the areas of the court, not to leave dark spots, and it was designed very specifically by a sport court lighting company to function like it should for that kind of play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I just wonder if there's any creativity, just talking to a lighting professional, of using light, I get it, but I wonder if light's light, in a sense that you can move it around with a parking lot light. just
I'm sure
depending
that
on the
I'm sure
calorie.
the lighting professionals will tell you that light is not light. Light is not just light. I'm sure as an architect, Sean's probably dealt with some of that in the past.
I understand,
but,
what I'm saying is like, if you talk to Mountain States Lighting out of Mead, John over there that's helped him with our dark sky lighting, he has a cowl for just about everything, so I bet if you said, can we make this diffuse, he could do it.
I suspect that that might be an option. I think, we're also concerned about total budget, and so eliminating the majority of the lighting rather than eliminating some of it and replacing it with less expensive lighting still brings us down to a better number.
Mhm.
But I think that's, we're also looking for direction from you.
Yeah.
I think we have the money to, we could spend the total amount and build the full project with the lighting as planned. We would have to take more out of that park development fund.
Yeah.
And we're also a little bit concerned about our town park bid. That's out to bid right now, and we've been carrying cost estimates for the last year and a half as we've been doing the design work for that project. And we've increased those a couple of times, and this bid gives us a little bit of pause and worry that it's gonna be significantly more than we expected. Park projects are unique, and so we're also trying to reserve some of those funds on the chance that we have a significant overage on town park beyond what we expected.
Okay,
And some of it was listening to our current neighbors to the east about the lighting and amount of lighting that's currently there. And their concerns with it. They call and talk about the lighting that's on or lighting that's been on, and
at
so,
Wagner,
yeah.
Yeah.
So adding more
That too.
light, we took that in consideration, and
okay, I've heard from the pickleballers that that's one of the concerns was losing the lighting, so some of them were paying attention to this. I just wondered if we could do some kind of hybrid of just parking lot lights that are already kind of on right now, just add 4 more, but if that's not a possibility, then. So my other was just more of a comment of using open space fund. We're funding the majority of this out of that. Is that how I'm reading this? I
Yeah,
thought this was coming from the 1%, the 2019.
no, the budget was for the Larimer County Open Space Fund. That allows us to use it, and a lot of what we spend our Larimer County Open Space money on is park and recreation, or historically, that's what we spent it on.
Historically,
This year,
yeah.
if you'll recall, we set aside $200,000 for open space acquisition, and we plan to do that every year to kind of build up that bank.
Pack fee.
It is, and it'd be $890,000 budgeted. $850 was for the Larimer County Open Space Fund, and that was for the pickleball courts. The $40,000 was for a maintenance shed adjacent to it, both to serve the pickleball courts with equipment needs that we may have, but also just to serve the park as a whole. And so we're gonna incorporate a shade structure on that. The total bid amount, I think for that item, Jeremy, was $150,000, $149,000, something like that. And so we had budgeted $40,000 for a maintenance shed, that came in at $149,000, also because we added shade structure to it and other things that we hadn't originally intended. But our belief is that at least $100,000 of that $149,000 is attributed to the maintenance shed that our parks crews will use to maintain the whole site, not just the pickleball courts.
Other questions?
I have a question. On the breakdown, concrete was listed, what concrete would be possibly taken away from the original?
just a suggestion, if we take a look at it, this, can you see this, Meyer?
Mhm.
So this is an existing crush refine, I believe, that goes
I can't
around this
see
way.
it.
It goes on the west side and the south side.
I can't see your pointer.
Oh,
West side and south side, that's fine.
yep. Oh. Look at that. Thank you, Chris. So, the flying globe, red UFO. On this west side here is an existing crush refine, and on the south side as well. Through the process, the desire was to make that concrete all the way around.
Okay.
Cause it would tie into a concrete trail that goes out to the east community and, would tie all the way around. There's another concrete one that's existing. Maybe it stops here, to go up the fields.
Would there
Okay.
be some
This one
concern
would possibly
with,
stay concrete.
would there be some concern with using crusher fines there?
What's that?
Because of, I'd be concerned with using crusher fines there and it getting kicked onto the course, onto the courts.
It's set back from the fencing around the pickleball court, and it'll be buffered from
Yeah, the
the
fencing.
pickleball courts by landscaping and fencing and a retaining wall on the east side. So I don't think there's a high likelihood that that'll be a significant problem. The primary pathway from the parking lot to the pickleball courts will be concrete for ADA accessibility reasons. This would just be kind of on the south and west side, where actually crushed fine trail already exists. So rather than remove it and replace it with concrete, we just leave it with crushed fines and make whatever connections we needed to with crushed fines.
Are there any plans for any kind of, I know the rec center has a couple of security cameras around just watching. Are there any current plans to add any to watch over this as it's being developed?
That's one of the reasons why the project expense includes a contingency, so I think we're covered to deal with, changes throughout construction that inevitably occur. We asked for a little bit extra to, cause there's always something that comes up like security cameras and we go, hey, we needed to add security cameras and we didn't plan that in the budget.
Sure.
That's a good example. So just having a little bit of extra budgeted funds to be able to make some of those adjustments.
I guess,
This was never in the original port plan, right? Kind of added this on.
This was an add-on.
No, okay. Other questions before we open it up to the public? Trustee Murphy?
The only question I had, do you have a distance between the courts and the nearest residence, roughly?
That is a good question. Straight as the crow flies, I bet it's 400 to 500 feet, maybe 500 feet.
I think
That's
that's
substantial.
Yeah.
It's like about what I think they're setting as a standard in some of those new policies in Denver and stuff.
Yeah,
I'll give it a quick Google Earth measure while you
thank you.
talk and I'll
Much
tell you.
appreciated, Administrator. That's all I have.
That's a good question.
It's about 680 feet,
That's
plus or minus, maybe 600. So yeah, Jeremy's pretty close.
All right.
only question I had was, in terms of park development fund, is this going to significantly impact Richardson Park and how that's gonna be developed? Is that essentially pulling some funds down and essentially possibly postponing or delaying Richardson Park, or has that already been kind of roughly budgeted and this isn't necessarily overlapping on that?
I think Richardson Park, should the town board wish to accelerate the development of that park, we'll have to use general funds that we have in reserve. We've saved up, currently we have about $24 million in general fund reserves. And we have a handful of projects we wanna suggest that you spend that on, including some other, public infrastructure stuff.
I would say accelerate, this is just the plan, right? What would we
Yeah,
be
yeah.
accelerating?
It wouldn't, if you didn't wanna wait until we had enough park development funds, which would be quite some time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we would, in order to get that project done in the reasonably near future, we'll be using a different pot of money.
Got it. So it doesn't have any direct impact, it's two different pots of the, got it. Okay, that's the only question I had.
Other questions? Okay, we have two signed up here. I'll open it up to the public. And if you didn't have a chance to sign up, I'll just come up afterwards, but we'll start off with Herb Hegut. Welcome. And if you could state your name and address again for the record, thank you.
Yes, name is Herb Herget. I live at 568 Canyonland Street down in Heritage Ridge. And thank you for letting me speak. I'm the president of the Berthoud Pickleball Club. The Pickleball Club sponsors socials, tournaments, ladder leagues, and activities for members. And but a lot of us play 6 or 7 days a week, and we don't control all that, but we try and influence behavior and training for that. Hats off to Keith and Jeremy and the port committee for letting us give input. They came up with a great design, great details, awesome. Understand, I'm very disappointed as you are with the bid. I was hoping, when we were here 7 months ago or whatever, that the million, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of money. And then it's more than that. So I understand the cuts, and I've told the port committee and I've told them in the past, and I think the town board previously, first thing I would support letting go would be the lights, because the quality, keep the 8 courts, keep the fencing. That is important for the quality of play and the use, and daylight is our most valuable time anyway. And my guess is we're probably 400 feet away from the housing, so that's a big improvement from where we are today. And, and I think the decibel level would meet what they're concerned with down in Denver and so forth. But the other amenities that he put on the list to withdraw the benches and so forth, I support the proposal.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. Robert Hayes? Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Robert Hayes. I'm at 629 Wild Honey Drive. I'm involved in helping organizing the open pickleball play at the rec center today. I'm really excited about the upcoming plan. I heard the ideas about the lighting. I think it's a good idea to make sure that we have the conduit in, so if we can't afford to do the lighting at this point, at least we have that for the future. Maybe the parking lot idea is still one that has some merit, but we probably need to ask the lighting experts about that piece of it. My only other comment would be is I think this is another big step forward to Berthoud. I can tell you from the people that I come in contact with in pickleball, they're coming from throughout the region. So hopefully, you know, besides our local residents, we can attract some regional people to come in, make sure that they're, you know, visiting our local businesses and so forth. So I'm real excited, and that's my input.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that did not sign up wishes to speak to this pickleball bid?
Mayor, we have someone online.
All right, if whoever's online, if you could state your name and address, please.
Go ahead, Randy.
Randy, if you're trying to speak, we can't hear you. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone else?
There is not.
All right, Randy, we'll give you another 10 or 20 seconds to see if we can figure this out. Otherwise, if you could just email the board. Does it look like it's on our end, or can't tell?
It's on theirs.
There we go. Randy, we heard that.
Oh.
Hi.
Okay,
Randy, if we could get your name and address, please.
yes, Randy Neese, I live at 903 Canyonland Street, also in Heritage Ridge.
Thank you.
I just had a question about the schedule for construction. Do you anticipate this being done by midsummer, end of spring? Have they even presented a schedule yet?
Thank you. Mr. Neese.
Part of the bid was to, they had to be done by September 25th. That's their only guarantee, is they have to be done by September 25th. Whether that happens, they can get in right away on their schedule after tonight and get moving. I don't know what that looks like, but September 25th was the deadline we gave them in the bid.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. I'll close the public comment, bring it back to the board for discussion. How we all feel about this?
General support of trustee Ayers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea. I like the cuts. I think the infrastructure for the lighting is important as long as it's there. I mean, if it has to go in anyway, I don't think it makes sense to not put it in for future use, but I think it will. As Trustee Hardy said, I think that might also cut down on some of the complaints, especially late night. As far as the other cuts, I mean, any way to save money, I think, is a good idea for the benches and the trash cans. I would say maybe go back and try to get cheaper bids on those. I think having a trash can or two is better than not having them. Same thing with benches, right? If it's a matter of just getting cheaper equipment versus cutting on the number of them. If it's, you know, if it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the summer, somebody might wanna sit down.
And for clarity, we actually, we should have made that clear. Our intention is to work with contractors to select cheaper options than what we planned in the bid. And there are significantly cheap, I mean, I don't know why, but the trash cans we spec'd were over $4,000.
Wow.
The gold plated?
And you know, I mean, you have to remember that we don't, you know, trash cans for home use don't last very long in a public setting, right? And so typically things that we purchase for public use are significantly more durable and as a result are more expensive. $4,000 is ridiculously expensive. So we can buy some really nice durable trash cans for like, you know, 1/10 of that cost. So that would be our intent, is to not eliminate, but to find much less expensive options.
Those are my only comments. I'm supportive, so.
Trustee Murphy?
You know, when you receive bids like this, it's always kind of a gut punch.
Yeah.
But I think staff's reasoning behind this, particularly with the cuts, is sound wisdom, particularly with stubbing in the conduits for their appropriate lighting. I will defend the lighting designers and say lighting isn't just lighting. But beyond that, just going forward, I certainly appreciate having the adults in these decisions, you know. Obviously, it helps to knock 300,000 roughly off this bid. Going forward, and I know Town Park is out to bid, but with future projects, can we have larger ad alternates in these projects kind of built in? So we can cleave out larger chunks when we get bids like this?
Yeah, in this case, we actually had a lot of, the bid was broken down really in a really detailed way. It's not just like a couple of lump sum items. Actually, one of the areas that we significantly under budgeted was just mobilization and earthwork costs, which are over $300,000. That is a staggeringly high number in our experience and even recent experience. But both bids were similar in their amounts, so I don't know that it was off. It wasn't that it was off. It just was much higher than what we're accustomed to seeing. Really, most of the other line items were relatively minor amounts, and so the lighting was the biggest ticket. It was also the obvious kind of low hanging fruit. The courts themselves, the post tension concrete, the fencing, the nets, the signage, that was $350,000 plus or minus. So actually, I mean, and that's after you do all the underground work and the grading and all the other stuff. So there's several $100,000s expense just to get to that place. But I think your point as a whole is always a good one. And we do try to structure our bids in a way that there are a lot of clear. We could have structured the lighting as an ad alternate rather than as just a broken out part of the bid. And in those cases, sometimes it's a little easier to negotiate a change order.
Sure. I guess what
Yeah, I think your point is a good one.
I guess
breaking
what
down
I'm
those big
referencing
projects.
is a situation like this where we have a specific number of replicated courts, I think lends itself to something like that.
I see
a
what you
little bit
mean.
more.
Yeah.
Just seeing that breakdown and having the ability to decide on it, I think is critical just going forward for these kind of bids.
It's a good point.
I'm supportive with the modified, drawn down kind of plan without the lighting.
All right, trustee Hardy.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem? Oh, sorry.
Cut it out in the middle of nowhere and hopefully the sound won't be an issue and hopefully we'll have the best courts in the area.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, no, I'm on board with it. For as at times vociferous as some of the pickleball fans can be out there, it is very much appreciated. A lot of these decisions were based off of pickleball players, and this was absolutely a community need, whole point. So, thank you for coming out and helping guide some of these decisions. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome.
I like it.
Yeah, for the most part, I feel the same, and I appreciate staff coming back with these cuts. Unfortunately, we have to do it. I'm very appreciative of those who show up, are supportive that these are necessary things that have to be done. Admittedly, it was a family member who's a big pickleball player that told me lights are an absolute necessity to compete with Mahaffey. But we'll have to make those cuts for now, and maybe there's some fundraisers or stuff. That's why I was trying to get creative about parking lot lights, is try to get something in there. But
Go to Home Depot, get some tripod lights.
yeah, I know a connection. Anyway, I think, yeah, it's something we have to do to get it done. Again, it wasn't in the original port plan, so we did kind of push this in just because pickleball has become such a huge thing, and really for all ages, it's something you can continue to do. And I get my butt kicked by seniors all the time. Unfortunately, we can't open it back up to the public, sir.
One comment?
But yeah, so I'm supportive, and I hope in the future we can just try and keep the funding outside of Lambert County open space. I understand that the wording does allow it for this, but I think in this community, especially right now, there's a lot of push to protect open space. So as much funding we can keep in that to preserve farmland and riparian areas and stuff like that, the better. But I want to end on a positive note. Thank you very much. This is going to be really exciting. Bob, thumbs up. Does that work for you? September 25th? Hope so. Jeremy?
And just one thing, and that relates to that is once it's complete, that'll effectively close the town park one. You guys are, previous board's recommendation. Once
Thank
this
you.
was completed, that will effectively close out that
Okay.
board. Just so.
So
you guys
September
are-
25th for Mr. Barkeen and all the neighbors over there.
And Town Park may actually be sooner depending on bids and when construction starts for that project.
Yeah.
So there may be a couple of month window where we don't have outdoor pickleball courts available.
We'd still have them at, we'd have them at, the PGA course, we have them at Prairie Star. There
There
should be
are
public.
other locations in
We have
town.
indoor ones at the rec center.
Yep, so for a month or two, we can handle that. Okay, anything else, trustees? Is there a motion?
I'll move to award the bid for the 2023 pickleball court project to ECI Construction in the amount of $1,350,000.
Hold on here,
For clarity,
we got two different numbers.
what we'd like you to do is to award,
Award that and
approve the
then,
award of
and
the
then
project to
take
the
care of it.
contractor. Allow us to increase the budget to $1.35 million. We'll make that change officially at mid-year.
Oh, trustee Ayers, I apologize, you had it right, mine says 1.46310.
That was the total bid amount originally, I apologize. But then also direct us to work with the contractor to reduce expenses by reducing and or eliminating lighting and reducing other site amenity costs.
So I will withdraw my motion.
You did it right.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
I thought it was to clarify what you just said.
We don't wanna award the project to them in the amount of 1.35 million. We want to increase the budget to 1.35 million and just award the contract to the contractor and direct us to negotiate reductions in cost to bring the project under budget.
Okay, sorry about that, trustee Ayers, go ahead.
We can do so moved.
That works,
So moved.
all right, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, trustee Ayers, seconded, clerk may have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsberg.
Yes, all right, thank you, everyone. All right, we can now move on to our 5-year sidewalk plan, and this is by our streets and parks director.
Public Works Operations Manager.
Dang, all right, there we go. I wasn't even close on that one.
Well, it doesn't really fit.
I hear streets and I hear parks, I always send people to Keith, so.
That's right. Okay.
Good. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
With this presentation on our 5-year sidewalk improvement plan, the purpose of the sidewalk maintenance and replacement plan that we have is to improve the public right-of-way to allow for greater pedestrian accessibility in our neighborhoods with the greatest needs for improvement. These repairs and replacements include ramps, sidewalk slopes, cracked sidewalk, trip hazards, and sometimes missing sidewalk links. We've identified the areas with the greatest needs in 2018 with an ADA transition plan. This plan went out and they looked at all the sidewalks, they looked at all the ramps throughout town. They ranked them, they put together recommendations for staff to follow. Areas 6 and 4 listed, and mainly the north of 4, which is considered the old town areas with the oldest infrastructure, had the greatest needs. The plan also included a survey that went out to residents, and we had about 99 responses. Since this plan has been in place, we've worked through a few of these other priorities that were given in the plan. The Welch Avenue for safe routes to school, we've improved ramps up and down 7th Street. We've improved some infrastructure on Bunyan as well. The road improvements also looks towards this plans. If there's adjacent road improvements, we look at the sidewalk conditions and also just refer to the plan. So the sidewalk plan that you saw in the packet looks like this. It's important to note that the sidewalk improvements are separate from the road improvements, but the road improvements that are listed on the right, we will still continue to improve the sidewalks adjacent to those road improvements. For instance, Bunyan from 1st to 7th, that's slated for mill and overlay in 2025, so we would look at sidewalk improvements along Bunyan in that section as well. So these are add-on sidewalks that we do in addition to the road improvement adjacent sidewalks. Looking through the estimates, we were able to, we received our bid this year for the 2023, that was approved in the consent agenda. On the map, that is all the dark blue area, I know there's a lot of colors on there, but that bid came in around 550,000, which is within a budget that we can work with this year. We believe the remaining years, a $500,000 budget if revenues and fees are still available to continue that. We believe 500,000 could continue to complete these parts of the project, and that would allow, there's additional funding not in there listed, mobilization, traffic control, tree removal. And then also, like if you look at 2024, and that's 344,000, we would also look at the adjacent road improvement, and those sidewalks would go into this budget as well, so mixes all of those together. This would be the course of 5 years, a few segments each year would allow us to get through most of Old Town. A big chunk of it taking place this year because our road improvements are going through the Old Town there, and it's about 1,100 feet of sidewalk we have listed in the bid there. In the bid packet, you also saw how it was broken down for the cost estimates. We were able to get these costs from the bids we received a couple weeks ago for the concrete. I just wanted to bring up, there were some typos in the packet. There were some road segments not listed correctly. I fixed those, so, in case any of you all saw those. Just in these, if we look back at 2024 to 2027, there's roughly 4,300 linear feet of flagstone within those. And I wanted to bring up flagstone because this is the first year we've really had a significant amount of flagstone in the work areas that we're going through. How we've approached it this year is we've offered residents 2 options. They can choose to have their flagstone removed, and we will try to place it. If they want to keep it, we'll place it on the side for them. If they want us to take it, we'll take it from them, and we'll replace it with full concrete at no charge to them. The second option is we gave them kind of a short notice, now looking at 45 days to start making repairs to the flagstone. Many of these residents have flagstone that they haven't repaired for decades. At talking with residents, it's a yearly process to look at this flagstone. You got the frost heave, you got the tree roots and everything like that. So they will have the option to keep their flagstone, but there's guidelines they have to follow, and town staff I've already walked many of these segments with them and said what needs repaired, what are we trying to get rid of in order to keep their flagstone. I've personally talked with 15 out of the 16 residents that have the flagstone. I've explained it doesn't need to be done in 45 days, it's just you need to start working on it. This needs to occur because we're trying to get these right-of-ways as compliant as possible. Out of the 16 residents, 8 of them want to replace it with concrete, and 7 want to keep the flagstone. And I haven't talked to one so far. So there is a mix. Some people are very thrilled that the flagstone is being replaced, and they're going to keep the flagstone and make patios and other things with them. So they want to keep the flagstone with their property. Obstacles that we expect to see throughout this process would be tree roots. It's always our intention to keep every tree we can. In this case, what we see here on the left is a tree that I would say is encroaching into the right-of-way, a mature tree. Typically in situations like this, we have this tree as the responsibility of the homeowner. This homeowner should have removed this tree long ago. It shouldn't have been a town responsibility since they're encroaching within our right-of-way. And that's something we can discuss if we want to leave that as a homeowner responsibility to remove that. Now, we'll do everything we can. There's a few things we can usually do, but once you start, usually when you get in there, there's a lot of roots, and they're anchor roots and they're important roots. So we look through all the options first, and we talk with the town forester as we go through this and our engineers. Utility poles will just involve some coordination with the utility companies. Hopefully, we can get them, that's an added cost to get them to new poles if it's possible, things like that. That could cause some delays in some segments. And then driveway approaches, as you have a flat sidewalk and someone has a driveway approach with a sloped angle, that's not ADA compliant, too high of a cross slope, those again will probably be raised into a type of rollover curb as we can. The toughest obstacles will be missing sidewalk. And if we should decide, and that's what's included in all this, add sidewalk in all places that it's missing. If you look from 3rd Street to 4th Street, almost every segment from Massachusetts up to Lake, there's almost no sidewalk along there, and there's almost no sidewalk along 3rd Street as well. When you get into missing sidewalk, that's when you get into fences, that's when you get into trees and so forth. And I'll have a few options here to just kind of show. This option, you can see this missing sidewalk. Heading down, you see about 4 or 5 mature trees along there. An attached sidewalk would not be possible here because you'd likely cut into a lot of roots to make that sidewalk. The right-of-way does extend past those trees to the left. But again, you'd have to get further enough away from those trees and you'd likely be building a sidewalk pretty close to that homeowner's house. Just other things to look into. As you look further down the road, if you were to build a sidewalk close to that homeowner's house, then you'd at some point would probably cut the sidewalk back to become attached. And that's kind of an option that that shows here. Here's a sidewalk that's coming in from the bottom. It kind of L shapes out and then it kind of disappears. Behind the trailer in the back is a sidewalk that's very in there. So again, this would be talking with residents, changing a lot of what they've been used to for many years. This example shows again a driveway. You see little like pavers. There's landscaping next to the truck. I think I can use the cursor. Let's see. Like right here, you have gardens, established gardens. So fencing and so forth that have to be removed. This is a segment between 1st and 2nd. We've worked on this for actually a little over a year. The option to go to the north side, which talking with contractors and engineers would be the easiest route, but we would likely have to remove about 4 or 5 trees in order to do so because we'd likely be cutting the roots. When talking about missing sidewalk segments, if we're going to put a new sidewalk, we feel the town should cover the removal of the trees if it's going to do that. A little different from a tree that a homeowner has encroaching on there. These homeowners have actually agreed to have these trees removed along here, but you can tell it'd be a significant change along there. The south side's also an option, but we'd have to build out the storm drainage here as well. And then there's fencing and landscaping as well through here. So there are these challenges. The town code, I believe, and you can clear me up, Chris, on this, mentions a resolution would have to be in place. If the homeowner doesn't agree, the town board would have to create a resolution to add sidewalk there, just as something to bring up. Just walking around as we've done all these estimates, I talk with everyone we can. Some people are happy to have a new sidewalk. There's many people that, I've brought up, you'd have to take out all these trees and so forth. It's just their house and trees, everything wasn't planned with a sidewalk in mind. So these are the tough challenges we would have discussed with you all. If it's easy enough, if we just work with the homeowners that want sidewalks, we can put those in. Sidewalks or the homeowners that don't want sidewalks, that's where we'd have to, I think, bring the board involved and get a resolution in place to deal with those. Looking through the plan, I think that's really just it. We can open it up to the board for any questions.
Awesome, thank you, Mr. Knoll. Judge Hardy.
I've got a couple. If we have to remove the trees, will we replace the trees from our nursery?
Might not be from the nursery, but I think we would offer that option
Okay.
to provide a tree from the town.
And then do we have to keep our sidewalks nice and straight and narrow, or can we be creative and make them maybe curve around the trees?
We can do that as well.
Do some
Yeah.
winding sidewalks?
We've done that before. It's clear we have to do that in a handful of locations, just looking at what we have this year.
Because I'd be more for creativity with the sidewalk placement than having a tree removed that's very well established and happy. I don't mind a sidewalk that's not perfectly straight. I think it maybe a little character. But yeah, I mean, but also growing up in Old Town my entire life, so many people don't even use the sidewalks anyway. If they're there, they walk in the streets. So that's where I'd be probably more apt to do a creative jog around with the sidewalk than to remove a healthy tree.
And I think it's safe to say, you know, Keith and his team, everywhere where they can avoid taking out a tree, we do. And we, as he mentioned, we have gone around trees, we've kind of jogged the sidewalk in and moved it back out. It still needs to stay within the existing right-of-way, otherwise we have to go acquire either pedestrian easements or additional right-of-way in order to move it farther into the property. And so that's where it gets really tricky, is when there's not existing right-of-way to get that sidewalk in and work it around the trees. Then we have to go out and acquire that. And if the homeowner is willing to dedicate that, that can be done. There are other processes involved in that, but you know, again, if we can avoid the trees, that's the number one priority, is to go around them.
I agree with Trustee Hardy. I think, and there's probably more we could do. I'm just wondering the legality of it. I mean, do you have to have a five foot for ADA? Was that what you said?
I think 4 foot.
But to save a tree,
You
I
can
mean,
get
it's-
down to 36.
Yeah, okay. Because there's huge value to
48's what we try to go for.
48.
Would
Whenever
the
we're bringing.
actual easement, if the homeowner's like, yeah, I really appreciate you wanting to keep the tree, you can come in and make that sidewalk go in without having to, I mean, what's the legalities behind that? I mean, can we put the sidewalk there if the homeowner signs off on it? I mean,
Only if they dedicate that existing or additional easement or right-of-way. Like, we'd want something that is permanently dedicated to the town and its citizens for use.
is that for like enforcement purposes, like if the sidewalk goes bad in the future or whatever?
That's just so they have a legal right to use it, because if that homeowner moves or sells the property 6 months later, the next homeowner could say,
private sidewalk.
yeah,
What
they
if the
could
homeowner
they
took it
could
upon
rip the
themselves?
sidewalk out and barricade it and say, this isn't public, and it never was, and it's not dedicated that way.
What if the homeowner just took it upon themselves, built a sidewalk in there without the town doing it?
Well, they could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can let anybody walk across your front yard that you want to. We can't force you to allow people to walk across your front yard if it's not within the right of way or public easement.
So that kind of segues on the question then, it's like, if I built a sidewalk on my property and then I sell my house, I did it on without an easement, but then who owns what?
If it's not within the public right of way, then I would think that the next homeowner has the right to remove it.
Could you go back, because I don't want to interrupt, but yeah, perfect. So here, the options seem to be on the north end, cut it, put a sidewalk in, or nothing. You cut the trees down. But what if we just tried to make it work, and if the trees happen to die on their own, then they die on their own?
Talking with the residents and, if they were bringing our arborist out and us cutting those roots would be a liability.
So
Decline the
this-
tree's health.
So this
these
whole,
all-
this is all private property, none of that's on a town easement? I have a feeling, because if you look a little bit more west, there's actually a sidewalk, a little tree lawn, and then it stops, like one house in, right?
Right over here.
And so I think this wasn't originally a tree lawn, and then people just pulled it up over time, or I guess some of these are newer homes. I'm wondering if the easement, if these are actually on town property.
They are likely within the right of way.
Yeah, within the right of way. So do we have the control then to just say, let's put in a 36-inch sidewalk for now and try to keep the trees? And if they die on their own, then they go. But we're assuming that these will die, and they might not.
Well, after seeing them on the tree on 7th and Franklin, that they chainsawed about a foot of the tree off in order to put the sidewalk and the ADA gutter in. I called Joe Nat and I was like,
Is it dead though?
no, it's
Yeah,
still alive.
that's what I'm
It's
saying.
crazy. I mean,
Mine is too, and it's had a
amazing
big
how
cut
much
in
they
it.
cut into that tree, and the tree's still alive today, and that was like.
So I'm just wondering here, if there is some flexibility where we don't have to say cut it or no sidewalk, if we can just say we're gonna try and do it and keep the trees, and if they happen to die, then absolutely the town can offer to replace them. What do you think?
I mean, just talking to the homeowner, he wants the trees down.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of how,
Well, that gets a little tricky, because that's just his, maybe
so
this individual's want, but maybe the
His side.
community's want is to keep the shade and have accessibility. And I think I'm really appreciative of you bringing this up, because this is a really important corridor where the safe routes to school didn't go all the way to First Street. And I know this resident on the south end said she's actually fine with the sidewalk going through her property, Gina here, but either way. I was just wondering more if we could save some of these trees and not assume that they're gonna go out.
I think in general, we rely on our forester's recommendation, and so depending on where that sidewalk would need to go. I think there are instances also where if you build the sidewalk and it's right up against the, so the first tree close to the edge is fairly mature, the one as you head west is gonna continue to grow potentially, and certainly the one a little farther is definitely gonna continue to grow.
Mhm.
And so you may cut back. The other problem that you run into is when you cut back and then you install sidewalk, the sidewalk is also likely to be damaged relatively quickly as that tree continues to grow.
Sure, in a
So-
growing area, yeah, we don't wanna plant them close here, but I think, yeah, I see your point.
So I
I'm
think
just thinking with
there's
some of
that
these mature
balance.
ones,
Yeah,
they're not gonna, the diameter is probably not get that much thicker on the mature ones.
Yeah, I think there's probably truth to that. I mean, I don't know about trees, I shouldn't say that, I'm just relying on Paul's judgment, but
When I wonder what Paul, and I'm not,
Well, yeah.
absolutely not a tree expert, absolutely not, but I'm wondering if you were, what was the question asked of him? Is this bad for the trees? Certainly. Are the trees gonna die? Maybe not,
yeah, I mean, I think there's always a chance that they will survive, even if you hack through, major root systems.
Yeah. I give odds on the tree surviving over the sidewalk surviving.
Yeah, historically speaking.
I think the
The
homeowner just
sidewalk
has an
always-
argument that we damage the trees and we should take them down then. And so, I think it just leads into that. Now, I think we're leaning towards the south a little bit right now. When I told Paul to go out there and look, it was, can we just choose the south side? So we might end up just going that direction, but the north side has a sidewalk leading to here.
That was on that safe, or that was on our walkability thing Chris and I participated in. That was identified as a. Yeah, cause you said the sidewalk just stops there and then there's nothing here. Sooner or later we'll wanna address it. Okay, sorry.
In terms of sidewalk, I know the can we've been kicking for years, essentially is the sidewalk replacement plan. I know what the rules currently say, but enforcement's not necessarily been aligned with that. And with, 5 years of updating, bringing things up to code, sidewalks that don't exist and replacing flagstone for sidewalks that do exist, they're just not ADA compliant. Does this kind of essentially beg the question of, do we now actually have to start enforcing some of that? Because by creating and replacing some of this, are we implying that we own this now and we have to replace it? Or we just replaced it and from here on out, it's on the property owner, even though it's our right of way?
I think our code continues to say that the sidewalk is the homeowner's responsibility, and I think when we have the right to go and make modifications within the right of way, the code still says it's their responsibility to maintain and replace as identified by the superintendent of streets.
But we haven't been using that to help fund this.
No, we have not been out requiring homeowners to make major repairs to their church.
Oh, I appreciate you doing it. It sounds like you did with the 45 days to get started.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we are kinda getting on that enforcement.
Really only in the context of the flagstone though, and that, that the idea was, if you want us to take out the flagstone, we'll take it out, we'll do our best to not break it, but we're not gonna promise, we'll give you whatever's left. Or we'll haul it off, your choice, or if you wanna keep it, you can pay to have it replaced in a manner that's ADA accessible.
And that's available for the cost share if it's ADA compliant, that they can keep the flagstone?
I don't know, the ADA cost, or the sidewalk cost share program specifically said, if you wanna do flagstone, you do it on your own at your cost.
Yeah, it's only for concrete.
Okay.
And so these residents, if we're replacing it with concrete, and if we had continued the cost share, damages, they could work with the town on covering 50% of that, so.
I guess, and that might just be a question later on for this, as this project is ongoing, and we might have to create a resolution essentially to force sidewalks to be put in right of way or us to acquire right of way. Maybe this board has an appetite to essentially finally make a decision of, we're putting it in new for you guys, it's on you now, or we're gonna continually kind of, our policy is you're supposed to fix it, but we'll still share half the cost. I'm just worried that essentially we're digging in a whole bunch of sidewalk at great expense. And again, it just kind of falls apart because I don't know if anybody knows, it's your sidewalk, it's your responsibility to, at the very least, repair.
Yeah, you're talking about specifically about the people that might not have the education because they don't have a sidewalk?
Well, that and the sidewalks that currently do exist that we've been kicking the can on for
Yeah.
a while of like, do we need to enforce this? It needs to get fixed. It's been needing to get fixed for a while.
Well, I
And
think, yeah,
It's mostly just a question of, does this board have an appetite to look at this later? Is this a related question? Does anybody have a strong opinion one way or another? I know this isn't necessarily relative to this, but it is a not too far from the future. Once this starts moving, this will become the next, we just put in brand new sidewalks, they're already starting to crack. You know, is this something we need to take a stance on? Should we take a stance on it? Just food for thought.
Properly placed sidewalks should last for decades. It doesn't always, right? I mean, we have super expansive soils and there's root intrusion, there's all kinds of reasons why a new sidewalk doesn't last as long as it should, but properly placed sidewalks should last a long time without breaking down. Sure. In theory, it will outlast us.
And I think, you know, I can add on our
In
door
theory.
hangers, we put out, okay, if we're fixing the concrete, it's still your responsibility to maintain it for the future.
Sure.
So we can add that in there.
For sure.
And then we're never gonna get everyone.
Of
I
course.
we get calls every week, you know, I lived here and they replaced our sidewalk. They always did it. It's just, that's not how it is here. Here's the codes and stuff.
Yep.
So
Oh,
here's the cost share program, and sometimes they choose to do it, sometimes not.
Sure. Are you replacing your flagstone wall?
I'm gonna try and keep it, that's why I'm disappointed about the cost share, but. No, it's really, well, you gotta live in Old Town, a lot of our neighbors have talked about it, they are historic, so these didn't come down by truck, they came down by draft horse, right? This is before Carter Lake was flooded, so there's a lot of local history with them. So to just haul them off, the Historical Society said that they would love to have them. So that should be one option, is that we don't haul them off to the landfill, we haul them off to the Historical Society.
Our intent is not to haul them to the landfill. If we take them off-site, we'll save them. And
Yeah.
either use them for the Historical Society, we could use them in a park somewhere, there's other options. If they don't want them, we'll take them, but not necessarily to the landfill.
Yeah, okay. And on Sixth and Massachusetts, I think it's probably because of your encouragement here, but it looks like they already started leveling off they did a great job. So I think if you get it flat, like my neighbors on the other side of Welch, it absolutely is ADA compliant, it looks really well. It's just, yeah, mine is a terrible example. So I would encourage that, you know, the whole thing is ADA compliant, then why are we excluding Flagstone from that?
No, it's just different tools.
Yeah.
The rest of the town has not flagstone, except Old Town does.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if Wheelchair can get across it, I mean,
Sure. No harm
better
in
not
that.
having one at all.
I would think, you know, talking with, or just hearing, wheelchairs do have a difficult time on Flagstone, strollers have a difficult time on Flagstone, and so forth, and so,
They're
everybody's
also-
Flagstone is different.
And they're
Yeah,
also
that's
hard-
probably there's a good clarification there, cause I have some shattered parts that are absolutely need to go.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine that the stroller difficulty is anything more significant than a little bit of gravel for the most part, you know?
No, I think you'd be surprised actually. From personal experience, my very first birthday days, we went to back in 2018, we went to the parade. And then we attempted to walk with the stroller to Town Park, and I had to get off and go in the street because I literally couldn't push it over.
But that's the heaving.
Some
That's,
of-
I'm
some
saying
of
if you had a
those Flagstone
totally
sidewalks.
flat thing, that,
Yeah, I think when it's totally, when
That's
it's
what-
been
that's my whole point
completely
here.
flattened.
yeah, so that's my whole point here.
It
If
can
you
be,
had an
it
88
can be better. It can be better, yes.
So do you remember that walk we did, we had the stroller with us? Yeah, it was the heaving.
Yep.
And then the shattered
That's where,
ones.
when we pull up the flagstone from someone that doesn't want it, we should make it available to those that want to redo their sidewalk with flagstone.
Often what happens too is it's very hard to remove that flagstone without it breaking.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Believe me, I've moved
so
a lot of
that's
it.
part of the problem too,
Try
is
to
when you
learn to
start to
keep-
pull it up and it starts to come apart, now you have broken pieces that now you have to piece back together and try to get flat. It just becomes a very challenging exercise in most
Sure.
cases, yeah.
I'm obviously hardcore against the idea of not putting these back, so I think the opportunity should be there, but the board can certainly say, you're not doing that, and do like Denver did and have it stamped, but then the stamping is the same thing. You're putting small artificial divots into it to make it look like what we have, which is the real thing.
Mhm.
And over 100 years of walking on it, I really find it harder to believe that the strollers thing is just the sandstone in itself. It's not the heaving or being crushed.
No, it's almost always the heaving. Yeah, and the broken pieces.
Which, yeah, that's the whole point of this replacement, is that's Will Carr spec, you gotta get rid of your heaving parts, which truly are ridiculous. I just don't wanna put, if I can keep these, I want it. And so I wish we could put mine up, because this is an example of why can't we have some of these wrap around and not the only option is to take out some of these huge trees. This is,
And for clarity, the only option is not to take out the huge trees. We do go around the trees in all the instances where we feel like we can. When they're not in direct conflict with the sidewalk in a way that, like, there's either no right of way where we can't push the sidewalk out of the way, or where the only place to push the sidewalk to one side or the other still leaves it running, 6 inches through the edge of the tree or whatever.
Okay.
So we do go around the trees in all instances where we can, and we have, like even along Welch and other places.
And
I have more questions, but they're not part of this plan, so I'll ask them privately.
And other than this option, most of the other options I showed had a sidewalk across the street that was added,
Okay.
right?
I
And
see your
so
point.
that's the other thing dealing with, it's like you can cross the street and use another sidewalk, but people are weaving in and out, so. Ideally, we'd have a straight thoroughfare and that leads you through, so.
I wonder with the history, some of these, like, I can almost say for a fact that my neighbors back in the day, not my neighbors, their aunts, whatever, way back in the day, some of those sidewalks were pulled out. And so there's straight lines of trees that looked like originally was a tree lawn, then it was pulled out and almost assumed that that's become private property now. So you used one of these as an example, and I think that was probably a tree lawn back in the day, when we have ash trees in a straight line.
Or they moved it from the inset and they moved it to
To
the
the
curb.
outside, yeah.
And then I remember there were some times where they tried to do that and then at the time code enforcement got them, so then they had to leave the original end, then they got to do their curb. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people try and move their sidewalks from
Inside to outside.
inside the tree line to the outside, to the curb side.
Yeah.
And you can tell a lot of times because to be looking on the sidewalk and all of a sudden there's no sidewalk, it's over here on the street.
Yeah.
And it's like, why'd you move it to the street?
So, but I think, yeah, and in those instances, I don't know, what I'm trying to get at is that to say that these never had sidewalks, they might have, it's just a long time ago and none of us can have the memory of it. And it'd be really hard with new
Well, they
homeowners to say,
intended to be there.
yes,
Like
and
the
it's just an
McCarty house.
education that these might have been already there, we just none of us
Yeah,
remember.
like at the Fickle McCarty house across from your dad.
Yeah.
That east-west run was never put in. But there could be one there, but it was never put in because I don't think they ever built the house to the west.
Yeah, right. Okay,
That
that's
person
it.
said
That's
they
yours?
want the sidewalk, so.
Sorry,
What's
what?
that?
That person actually said they would love to have the new sidewalk.
Yeah.
So that would create a, or
It's
just be a little
interesting because they
segment.
did put in a rose garden with some wrought iron fencing that they'll have to go right through.
We wanted to
And that's
keep
the
going
historical
through.
site?
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, great. Trustee Ayers?
Yeah, I had a quick question. What would be the liability to the town ADA wise for these gaps in the sidewalk? So if you, for this especially, there's a sidewalk on one side and it looks like, I think both of these sidewalks basically end at the same point, right? So if you put sidewalk in on one side and not the other because of the trees, is that a liability to the town for ADA rules? Like how much of the town has to be covered by sidewalks, I guess is a simple way to put it.
My understanding is if it's not there, you're not required to put it in. If you put it in or if you touch it, it has to be ADA compliant.
And then, yeah, I don't know the rules of it stopping like halfway down a block. If that's an issue.
I've never heard of an instance where we would have some liability associated with having gaps in the sidewalk. I don't know that we could be forced to fill all the gaps with new sidewalk.
Be grandfathered or something.
What that brings up in my head is the ramps. Okay, if we build a ramp, we make sure it's directed towards a ramp. We don't send a ramp into nothing, right? So that's where the ADA liability, I think, comes into play.
This makes sense now. Any other questions? Trustee Murphy?
No questions, just comments.
I know you were saying when roads are going to be repaired, not necessarily in the same area, but they will have sidewalks repaired if it's capable. I know there was a stretch on County Road 17 when that road is being replaced or repaired, I think here in 2 or 3 years, 2026, it's the red section, yeah, road improvements. Are there sidewalks that are going to be installed there? Because that, if I recall correctly, is going to have a couple of subdivisions in that area. I know sidewalk wise, that might be something they'll already have in mind, but because the road will already be there, is that something that you anticipate sidewalks to be attached to as well?
Just think that segment will likely change depending on the developments coming in and how we do that. Ideally, if there's developments being built down that, we just have them cover those costs and so forth. Looking at I know there's a few developments going through right now and that will probably cover some of these sections. And that's why this road improvement plan, it changed a little bit this year. Every year it's probably gonna update a little bit depending, so.
Sure. Reason I'm asking is because I know the developments that are gonna be coming along that road, as they start coming down that hill, there's a little creek down there that we've asked for trails to be installed and we've been told, yes, but you gotta wait. And I'm curious if it's gonna be installed there while we have the road up. I know widening a road over a little creek might be a little bit hard, but I'm just curious if that's currently planned for as well, while we're already there.
I don't think so at the time.
No, the Berthoud Parkway in 2026. Is that when that's planned, Keith? Sorry.
Yes.
That would just be a road resurfacing project, not a widening, and we would work with the developer to build that sidewalk prior to. Or we would require them to build it prior to if they're already under construction.
Okay.
Yeah, generally on our road maintenance projects, we're updating sidewalks that already exist. And we're correcting deficiencies, we're updating curb ramps. We're not, adjacent to our road projects, we're not installing new sidewalk.
Got it. Okay.
Only updating the ones that are already there.
Yeah, I was just curious because if we're already there, I figured it would make sense if there was not a sidewalk currently built, because I know they have, I know the Richmond has kind of sent a trail down facing like the south side from there, but I don't think it has any current connections. It's also not touching the road, which would prohibit it being updated with it, so.
Yep.
Okay. That's all I have.
Just gonna open up to the public here real quick. Has anyone here wish to speak to this? All right, bring it back to the board. Anything else? No comments?
I've got some
Yeah, go ahead.
comments, excuse me. So I forwarded an email kinda listing some other areas of concern that weren't covered by the plan. I think there are certainly areas worthy of consideration, particularly, some of the stuff on First Street, Welch, which was mentioned in that location. And then up by Berthoud Elementary, I'm sure there's other locations out there. But aside from that, it seems to me that this plan really has to have flexibility while working with homeowners. I really commend staff for taking up this challenge. I know it is a challenge to deal with this on a case-by-case scenario. But kind of looking at this, you know, I feel like, you know, as we go through, we're gonna learn a lot, but tackling this, you know, year one, I feel like the priority honestly should be just making repairs on existing sidewalk within that area, followed on by curb cuts. Following that up, obviously, we've got conflicts with mature trees, and I certainly feel that, you know, is in the purview of staff to work that out with the homeowner. You know, unless it's a critical piece of sidewalk, you know, I almost feel like staff should move on to the next, you know, option for repairing, you know. And that's where I think the flexibility comes in, you know, whether it's moving on to, you know, a section that, you know, is the following year, you know, as an option if we're getting pushback from certain areas and stuff where there's just too much conflict with repairing the sections. But going beyond that, I think, you know, obviously, you know, filling a lot of these gaps, you know, there's obvious challenges of landscaping, gardening, going on in those locations. You've got existing trees, you know, and unless it fulfills certain kind of requirements in my mind, which I tried to come up with, for prioritization of those gaps, which would be, you know, is it critical for safety? Is it heavily used? Is there easy installation at that location? And is it easily negotiated? I think if it fulfills, you know, multiple portions of that category, or multiple aspects of that for prioritization. I think that may be where we end up going with it. Beyond that, let's see. Just beyond that, looking at kind of following this on, I really, feel it's prudent that the town takes the first step on this issue. It's been a lingering issue since I moved here. Obviously, it's on the homeowner, but I do feel the town has some sort of general responsibility for safety and accessibility here. But that said, should we move forward with this plan, I certainly feel it should be followed on by education efforts and also enforcement efforts, honestly. I think we're making a good effort, good faith to tackle this problem, and it should be our citizens who should be tackling it on their own properties at the same time. So, those are kind of my thoughts on the issue.
Trustee Ayers?
No, I would echo everything that Trustee Murphy said. I think it's important to make sure that the older infrastructure is keeping up with some of the newer builds. I think some of the comments that I've heard from around town are, with all of the newer developments going up, the infrastructure is there, it's all nice, it's all neat, it's all clean, and it kind of feels like some of the older infrastructure is basically abandoned or ignored, at least in our minds, right? Obviously that's not happening, but I think it is important to move forward with this and fill those gaps as best as possible and clear up the trouble areas at first because of the safety of moving around town on foot, so.
Trustee Hardy?
I think it's all good just to start patching this up, because you and I, we've lived here all our life, we've kind of gotten used to it.
Yeah.
We've always had sidewalks that go to nowhere, and it'll be really weird to have sidewalks where there haven't been any, but.
It's fun too.
Yeah. But I think it's just growth survival of the fittest, lead paint.
Asbestos.
Cool. But yeah, it's a good process.
Mayor
As long
Pro
as
Tem?
the residents are supportive of it.
Mayor Pro Tem?
One of our strategic goals, love to see the layout. This is actually really informative for my knowledge. I'm all on board. I think it's a step in the right direction.
Excellent. Well, I totally agree. And then Trustee Murphy, thanks for your email and all the detail you put into that explanation. I 100% agree. I think we should tackle the kind of low-hanging fruit, or the areas that are already out there that need improvement. And I'm really glad we are going, given 45 days. And yeah, that might seem a little bit short, but we're doing something there. And it's, like you said, it's just 45 days to get the process underway. I tried to get quotes. It's harder than I thought to get people to mudjack my stuff, but I found one guy that said he would. He just said he might ruin some of the things in the process, and I said, hey, it's better than pulling it out. I totally agree with going after these. I think sooner or later we are gonna want to go after the areas that have zero sidewalk, but let's just start with the areas that need improvements. And it really, as much as possible, try to preserve the trees, and I know you already stated you are. And I'll just, case in point, it was actually yesterday, I was talking to my neighbors, and they were asking about the sidewalks, and they have heaving sidewalks, and the same conundrum came up of, I don't wanna cut down the tree, if it's heaving, and what do I do? So I don't have the answer for that, but it looks like we'll all be looking into that as we go along.
Invitation.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it, but I think if the board is comfortable with it, we would recommend you do this anyway, and maybe had worked with the homeowners, but I think it's good for you guys to agree that in areas where we have to take a tree out, that we would replace that tree or provide a replacement for that tree as well.
I think we'd be a little bit stronger if it's on a tree lawn, or if it's on public right of way, that a tree is going in. It's not an option.
Yep.
Right?
That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay.
That you guys agree that it's not an option. That
Gotcha,
if we
sorry,
remove a
thank
tree,
you.
that we put it back in.
Thank you. Cool, I support it, thank you. Sounds like we're all in support?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you very much. Is there a motion on this? I believe we need one. Yep.
Yeah, move to approve the 5-year sidewalk improvement plan.
Second.
Excellent. Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this. Trustee Hardy has seconded. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Hirschbeck.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Knoll. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we can go into the Metro District policy here. Call the meeting back to order and we'll go to our final regular agenda item tonight, which is the Metro District policy and introduced by Administrator Craig.
Thank you, Mayor Karshbeck and trustees. I should have asked Michelle to check the folder for the presentation. I didn't tell her it was in there.
We can grab it real quick.
It's on the Q drive, sorry. As you know, we've been working on the Metro District policy for quite some time, with the goal of creating a policy that provides reasonable and appropriate regulatory guidance for the town board in evaluating service plans and proposed service plans, major service plan amendments, so that as metro districts are formed or amended, that we can be confident that they will benefit the future residents of those districts and the town as a whole, and that they will be managed appropriately to the extent that we can ensure those details. We've addressed a long list of concerns to the board. I don't intend to go over all those, the ones that we've gone over previously. I did want to just walk you through some of the changes that have been made to the policy since our last meeting in January of this year. Went back through, we made a list, if you'll recall, at the end of that discussion back in January. We then met as staff and with Attorney Charles Norton and Attorney Smith to review that list and then made some adjustments to the policy to include language there. I've re-summarized that list in a presentation that I know Michelle is bringing up right now. And then we'll just talk to you about here's the concern that we heard and here's how we addressed it in the policy, much like we've done with the other issues in the past. I think that's probably the easiest way to walk through it. Attorney Norton is here as well. Are you having a hard time finding it, Michelle?
It is, I don't see it in here, and Christian went upstairs to see if maybe it just didn't update.
Well, it will generally and closely follow the memo that was in your packet anyway. I was gonna put it on the screen so it'd be easier to follow along, so I apologize.
That's okay, we can wait so the audience can see it too.
We'll give clerk some more in just a minute here. While he's looking to see if he can get that downloaded, maybe I saved it in the wrong folder, I hope I did not.
Classic.
There's a high likelihood.
Story of my life.
There's a
What
high
folder I
likelihood
put
that's
that in.
true. I do that kind of stuff on a regular basis.
I do too.
Much to the chagrin of Christian and Michelle, and pretty much everybody else. But Attorney Norton is here both to help answer questions. I also asked him to give you just a brief overview of some of the legislative efforts at the state level that are gonna have an impact on Metro District formation and operation in the future. And so maybe we could front load that and Attorney Norton could just kind of walk you through some of that, and then if hopefully Clerk Shimore will find that presentation.
That makes sense. Welcome, thanks for coming down again.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here, as always. Certainly enjoy working with you folks on this
Likewise.
interesting project. There has been significant legislation that was signed into law about 10 days ago, Senate Bill 23-110, which creates some additional control elements in terms of the filing of service plans and things that are to be contained in a service plan. I did want to stress to you folks that the way this works, given your status as a statutory town, is that you will have these powers and you'll be able to apply these elements. And there'll be mandatory portions of a service plan, even if they're not specifically addressed in your policies. So these are something which, if we decide over time to change the currently proposed policy for approval tonight to pick up some of these elements, that'll be a housekeeping thing, but it won't be necessary for you to apply those criteria or use that particular power. So one thing that was made express by the General Assembly is that the service plan is to contain a maximum mill levy that may be imposed for the payment of general obligation indebtedness. This is actually in your current policies. You had a requirement that that be specified. There was some issue as to whether that was, strictly speaking, permitted under the statute. The General Assembly has clarified that. So now each service plan will have to have a maximum mill levy for the payment of general obligation debt. It will also have to have the maximum debt that may be issued by the district as approved and determined by this body. Now that was spelled out in your current policies that are up for adoption tonight, but in a more indirect way. So it said you've had your financial analysis that will specify what your financial advisor says that the maximum debt is that the district should carry. This plan would just simply say, as a result of all of that process, here's the maximum debt you can carry. So this was a more explicit statutory authorization for this body to impose a debt limit, as we've frankly already done in the draft policy. So that power was provided both for counties and for municipalities like this municipality. There's also a requirement, which I think is kind of interesting, frankly, that each metro district that has residential properties in its boundaries is now to hold an annual meeting at which it doesn't make any decisions, but at which there is a public presentation about how the district is doing, how much debt it's issued, what the situation is with regard to debt service. The public is given an opportunity to ask questions at this meeting. There is a specification that the meeting, if in person, has to be within the boundaries of the district. It can also be online, according to the criteria in the statute. And there has to be a public comment period in which the public is permitted to ask questions about the status of the district. About the only change we've thought about in the draft policies for you folks might be in the future to make sure that the town itself is given notice of this annual meeting so that you can have a representative present. If you recall, the policies as they've been presented to you now have a provision that the town will designate a member of staff to act as a liaison between the developer and the community and the town with regard to review of the district. And so this statute would enable the town to, as we work with the policy, receive notice of that meeting, participate in the meeting. But ideally for you, that would just be part of an ongoing process of oversight that you have through the liaison and so forth. One of the more interesting provisions that came out of this was an effort by the General Assembly to address developer debt, which I know has been a concern of the board in the past. The General Assembly has specified that developer debt would be defined as debt either issued to a member of the board of directors of the district, which is a relatively rare structure. I've only seen it once in my work with special districts, or to an entity of which the director is an employee, a consultant, or has an ownership interest in the entity to which the developer debt is issued. If a debt fits into that category, then it has to have an interest rate that is the lesser of either the market rate of interest on the debt as calculated by the financial advisor that's retained by the town. And you'll recall that our policies provide, the draft policies provide for a financial advisor to be appointed by the town in all instances to review your metro district proposals and to comment on their financial viability. So the market rate of interest on the developer debt either has to be, as calculated by the financial advisor, that market rate of interest, or a rate of interest that would be imposed for debt which is AAA rated plus 400 basis points. So to try to illustrate an example of this, your financial advisor would, I won't comment too long about how feasible this really is, but anyway, what's contemplated is your financial advisor would do a calculation and say, okay, if this developer debt is to be made subject to, I guess, resale by the developer, otherwise it's not developer debt. But at any rate, what would the market rate of interest be for this? And you can look at a number of different factors. What's the comparable rate for other types of infrastructure issues, that sort of thing. So your interest rate would have to be the lesser of that or the AAA rated interest rate. And your various rating services, Moody's and so forth, publish interest rates for municipal securities, as you know. So it would be a AAA interest rate plus 4% essentially. So if the prevailing market rate for AAA securities was 2%, you could have the developer debt at 6%. And if that's higher than the market rate of interest as calculated by the financial advisor, it would be the market rate. If the market rate is higher, it would be the percentage plus 400 basis points. Does that seem reasonably clear? If it does to you, you may be better off than I am on some level, but yes, that's what's coming. I think the most important thing for you folks is there has been an effort to address this question. And the legislature has at least taken a stab at it. And it certainly implies that under the best interests of the district criteria that's in Title 32 for your approval of the service plan, this is a factor that you can look at, which is the thing I would find most reassuring there. In terms of other provisions, there is one about disclosure, which again I think is important and interesting. The policies that you'll be considering this evening put the main burden for disclosure on the developer, on the initial seller of the property, to disclose the existence of the district, the structure of the district. And then we've also included a provision that the contract, the IGA, that the town would sign with the developer and with the districts would be a covenant running with the land. So that when title work is done on a house within a district on resale, people would find the existence of the district disclosure and the district IGA, because that would be a recorded part of the chain of title. And that would enable purchasers to evaluate, do I want to buy this property despite the tax structure that exists within the district? The legislature actually, I have to say, and this is probably a little presumptuous, but I think we've approached this issue better and with a little more teeth. They've put the burden primarily on the seller of residential property, which I don't think there's much objection to that for the initial seller, for the developer that sells, or the builder that sells property. But it's also a burden for people on resale. They are supposed to make the disclosure about the existence of the district. So the private homeowner really has the primary responsibility to disclose to the purchaser, hey, there's a special district here. Here's where their website is located. You can look on their website to see what the debt structure is to make that disclosure. So really the reseller has that obligation. Now the way the legislature has tried to address that to make it painless is they have directed the Real Estate Commission in its standard form to put that disclosure. So there'll be a blank in the standard form in that package of things that you sign together with the contract. And then at closing, there'll be a standard disclosure which will say, this is located within X metropolitan district. Their website is www so forth, and go ahead and look it up and see what the district structure is. That may be workable. I think the covenant running with the land solution has more teeth, and I think you're certainly free to approve that in addition to imposing this requirement. So those are the principal things in the bill.
Thank you.
If there are any questions about those or comments.
It's good to know. Pretty extensive or in depth on some of those. I'll have to be honest, I didn't fully understand some of the security stuff, but.
Well, the security stuff is tough, and I'm
glad that there's someone, sounds like they know what they're doing looking into that.
Yes, I think that's the case. But it's certainly a legitimate effort to try to say, okay, this ought to be enough.
Mhm.
You know, if you've really got this tiered, and remember, you know, I think what's helpful here is that what you're really talking about is typically a tiered bond issue. So you've got your Class A securities in which the underwriter can market them pretty readily at a market rate of interest that's not unreasonable. It produces an immediate payout. The bonds are in the hands of third parties, not the developer. It produces cash, and the cash is used to reimburse the developer for their advances that they've made for infrastructure. That's kind of the classic structure. The B coupon debt is typically very similar. It may have a credit enhancement of some sort. It may have a somewhat higher interest rate, but it's typically placed with the market, generally speaking. So again, these are third parties. It's what's called C coupon debt, which is usually issued back to the developer. And this is where I think that because it's subordinate, it doesn't pay out first. So if you have a revenue stream over 40 years, you pay the A bonds first. Interest and principal gets paid first. Then the B bonds you pay next. And because they're in a subordinate position, you pay them up to the point where you can't actually service the debt if you have a bad year. Then they accrue, but bear in mind, they're in the hands of third parties, so you're gonna have to pay a higher interest rate. But then the C coupon is the least secure of any of them because it's third and tiered. So let's say you had a $40 million issue total with 10 million of Cs. The Cs don't get paid until the As and Bs have been paid each year completely. Otherwise, they accrue. Well, just the classic model, as you all know, you're gonna have a higher interest rate on the Cs typically because it's greater risk. In fact, you might be stuck with the entire issue. So the legislature is really trying to, what they contemplate is that C-level debt in a typical structure. And there they're saying, okay, you can have an interest rate that might be in excess of market conceivably. And I think the market's very hard to measure for those C coupons, I think very hard to measure. But you can have an interest rate that's higher than on a AAA security, but only 4 percentage points, 400 basis points higher. And that will compensate you for some of the risk, but you're still stuck in that C category probably, and you might never be paid.
That helps, thanks.
Is there any legislation in place that keeps investors, I would refer to as when I was in the mortgage industry as arm's length? You know, so that there's, you know, some investment outside, you know, so it doesn't, you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I don't, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, I think, if I understand the question correctly, Trustee Hardy, and I think I do, correct me if I don't. These are always, I mean, the statute doesn't say this, but these C coupons are not strictly speaking an arm's length transaction because they're issued to the developer of the project, essentially, or one of their employees in that rare instance. Yeah. So the effort is really to say, for that type of debt, and let me back up a step. I mean, the marketplace kind of acts as a corrector here. What developers really want is they want their money up front. They don't typically want a bond.
They want money up front, during, and after.
Sure. No, that's a fair statement to make. But just looking at the infrastructure need, if you've advanced money for infrastructure, they want that up front. They don't want it 15 years from now. If they can have it with a AAA rated, insured general obligation bond at 2% that produces cash and it covers all their infrastructure, they're happy with that.
But doesn't the builder or the developer have to pay for all that up front before the Metro District bonds out anyway?
Well, that is the mechanism that typically Metro District bonds pick up. So in a typical deal, what happens is the developer puts in the infrastructure. It's approved by the district, the developer advances the money or constructs the infrastructure themselves upfront, according to your specifications in your development plan and regulations. So they construct the infrastructure, they advance to the district the money to pay for it, to pay for its construction. And then they sign an agreement whereby the district will reimburse them for what they've advanced for infrastructure. That's typically how these deals, it's more than
So,
typical, it's how they work.
Throw out some basic.
Can I go back
numbers.
to your original point though? So there is no legislation to keep this, I see your point now, at arm's length though, because this is going to directly to
No.
the developer.
No, that, that basic structure that I just talked about is certainly still permitted.
That's standard, okay.
And it's what will be contemplated here.
So they can basically invest and buy bonds in their own development through the Metro District investment.
Yeah, I do have to say, well, first of all, in my personal view, an entity that's primarily focused toward that is a potential abuse of the special district structure, which I think they're trying to address. Most developers and people who have a good design are interested in developing land prudently and well and making a profit for a good, solid development. They want their money up front. They want to be reimbursed for their infrastructure as early in the process as possible, which means they're not really interested in securities horse trading or securities manipulation. They would just as soon see, again, $50 million worth of infrastructure costs. Let's issue some A bonds. Let's close them on the day we can when we have the assessed valuation in place that we can close on them. Let's market them. We'll take our reimbursement and our reimbursement agreements out of that bond issue, and that's the end of it. That is the preference. It's hard these days to do that with an upfront security that's in that A tier. That's something that the market can set a reasonable rate of interest for. So most of these deals involve the A, the B, and the C coupon type structure. And it really is the Cs, sometimes the Bs, but usually the Cs that are taken by the developer directly and held by them. And so that's why the interest rate is higher. Remember, when they hold the bond, the interest on it is not tax exempt,
Not taxable,
not tax exempt.
not tax exempt, so it is taxable.
Yeah, the structure of the Internal Revenue Code, as you know, Mayor, is the interest on a municipal bond is typically excluded from either corporate or individual income tax, simply excluded from your income.
I didn't know that, but that's good. Good to know.
And so if a developer holds a bond under the Industrial Revenue Development Bond rules, that interest is not tax exempt. So whatever interest they enjoy when they're holders is not exempt from taxation. So you can see how it might well make sense if you're in the developer's shoes to get rid of those Cs if you can.
Yeah.
But again, depending on the interest rate, they may be impossible to sell if they're not at an interest rate that corresponds to the risk.
Thank you. Any questions to Attorney Norton specific to these state upcoming bills?
Very thorough and very interesting.
Oh, thank you.
It is, thank you.
Yeah, and that's where I've been emailing Mike Weissman, House Representatives of Aurora. I've been trying to find a way to get him to come in and talk to us. It's kind of.
Chill and cold,
he's on the other
apparently.
side. He's just says legislation's like really busy. It's busy, they go in at afternoon, they're there till midnight, 2 in the morning. So his time is really limited. He'd be interested in doing a special meeting via Zoom. I don't know how that would work with addressing public meetings. If more than 2 of us were in attendance, we'd have to announce it 24, and that whole time I think it's kind of weird. So I was wondering if maybe the committee, I think it was me and Mike at one point, were Metro District Committee, if the 2 of us could meet with him via Zoom and discuss this, or just ask him to respond with comment via email to us all that we could put in our record. What's allowed, what's permitted in communications with our House of Representatives regarding a situation like this.
I think if you wanted to comment on our policy, he could comment on our policy like any other member of the public.
Okay.
Any questions for Attorney Norton specific to this, these bills? We got another presentation too. Thank you very much. And then let's bring up the original presentation here, and then we can field all these questions after this presentation. Okay.
when you come back.
Thank you to our clerk and deputy clerk for their patience with me. And for the town board, for willing to be patient.
That was good. It was perfect. We've got Attorney Norton in there. It worked out great.
Yeah, we were gonna have him speak anyway, so thank you for taking the initial brunt there. So back to the idea of the policy that we've prepared. Again, I think you know, we've gone through a long list of concerns as we've drafted that policy. We've talked about a lot of these creative strategies. I think that we've put in place that frankly are pretty cool and pretty forward thinking. Here are some of the things that came up in the last meeting on January 10th. There were some really good suggestions. Specifically things like we want districts to be able to fund facilities for emergency services like fire districts. We want to make that clear that that could be an extraordinary benefit in areas where a district might build a fire station, for instance. We want them to be able to fund acquisition of water supplies to support that development in the town. We want to limit metro districts' continuance when developments do not occur, so that needed updates can be made after those projects languish and never start. We want to reiterate and clarify bid noticing requirements, and we want to reiterate and clarify that districts must allow public access to their facilities and make that explicit in their service plan approvals and how that'll be done. We want to have a town liaison identified for metro district coordination and to take complaints and some other things. We want districts to demonstrate to the town varying levels of public benefits based on varying mill levies. And we want to have metro district information available on our website. I'll give you a sneak preview. Number 8's already done, but that's the last slide. So we want districts to be able to fund facilities for emergency services. So in section 2B8 of the policy, and again, this was all in your packet and included in the memo, but I think it's good to walk through it here in the meeting. That was added to the policy to encourage the inclusion of needed emergency services financing for the acquisition or donation of land for facilities like fire stations or other emergency services needs in new service plan proposals.
So the intent with that, with Trustee Sorcelli and I, was not just that you're able to do this, is that wherever the fire district says we need it, you will do it.
Yeah, and I think for
That was the direction for the board.
I think in some cases that's a difficult thing to do early in the service plan development process. And so in areas where we know that's gonna be the case ahead of time, and that could occur through the neighborhood master plan process, which you'll recall is required as part of the service plan approval process. The way the policy is written, you have to have a neighborhood master plan approved before you can have a service plan approved. That neighborhood master plan process would identify generally with comments from other entities like the fire district, because they're part of our normal referral process. They would reach out and say, we know we need a fire station here. Turion's probably the obvious example because it's out on the east side of town and they're pretty disconnected from existing fire resources. So during that neighborhood master planning process, the fire district would say, we need a fire station here, and the district could say, we will fund that as part of our infrastructure costs and dedicate it to the district when it's done, and then that would be included in the service plan. So not that it's, I don't know that it's I think it achieves the goal that you're stating, but it's not a you shall do this if the fire district reaches out and says, we think there needs to be a station here.
I think that was kind of the intent.
Because I think there's a little bit of a difference there in both code requirement and.
Yeah, so just to, my thoughts on this with Trustee Sorcelli and I kind of behind it was, yeah, Ludlow doesn't sound like they need it there, but there's areas, Turion, like you said, is the example. And just to not have the option of it having to come back to the citizens for a bond again, for development wouldn't pay its own way in that case. So it would say, Turion, the fire department needs it out there. You not only need to dedicate land, you need to put up the pad. So it went even farther than this.
And I think within the context of your approvals, in reviewing the extraordinary public benefits, that's where this would be included, right? So they would be saying one of the extraordinary public benefits that we're gonna provide as a metro district is to construct a fire station that the district has requested. the fire district has requested. And then you would say, yep, that's great. Now, if the fire district came and said, hey, we've been trying to work with them and we've asked as part of this project, we know this is a necessity, we know there needs to be a fire district station here. I suppose in the context of their service plan approval, you could say, well, we're not gonna approve it unless that was one of the extraordinary benefits that you proposed. I think in most cases, they would work. I guess we always have to wait and see kind of how that plays out, I suppose. But
Yeah, I'd be curious to get the legal on that, cause I would just, I don't wanna foreshadow things, but if they don't have it in there, I would just, a trustee might be reasonable to say, I'm not approving this. So I'd like some clarification that we have that ability. I don't wanna get into a situation where we're in a neighborhood master plan and it's up in the air that they don't include that as an extraordinary benefit, but I think it helps out the developer and the board that we know you're causing this demand, you're gonna put in the pad. Not only dedicate the land,
And
but
then who determines if it's an extraordinary thing? The developer might say, oh, this is really extraordinary, but I'd be like,
that's part of it, yeah, that's
Well,
part of you coming in.
The policy does give the board, within its evaluation criteria, kind of the ability to determine whether or not the public benefits meet the terms of the policy and demonstrate significant public benefit.
Yeah.
I think that's a decision that you then have to make if they say, hey, we're not gonna provide a fire station, but we'll provide a pad where they could park a fire truck on. I think it'd be pretty clear that that would not qualify as an extraordinary public benefit.
So you wanna just add that in there though, so it's clear for them, they don't go all this work and then we're telling them at the last minute that we might not approve it, you want, no? That was kind of the direction out of the last meeting. Was
Yeah,
that we make it
I
explicit.
obviously misunderstood. I didn't know that, I didn't understand that you were suggesting that they shall do that. Only that we should add that provision and make that an extraordinary public benefit that they could meet in areas where it was needed.
I thought the state already said that metro districts conclude emergency services. I don't think this is anything groundbreaking what we're doing.
No, I think you're misunderstanding. While they can do it, what we're saying is, in the evaluation of the service plan proposal, they will demonstrate to the town board how they're providing extraordinary public benefit in a specific set of criteria, above and beyond what might be legally allowed. They're having to demonstrate to you, these are the things we're actually going to do that are gonna provide extraordinary benefit above and beyond what might be normally required in our development.
Yeah, I get that. Okay.
And so emergency services would be one of those things. This
Okay.
isn't like, let's meet the bare minimum statute, this is, we're gonna demonstrate to the town board that we're providing benefits above and beyond the minimum required, and that's why we need a metro district, right?
Yeah, I get
So
that.
a fire district station, as an example, could be one of those extraordinary public benefits.
As long as they don't have that, if it happened with the developer that the fire said we really needed to keep an International Safety Organization level 2 rating, and they didn't have that in the plan, as long as we have the ability to deny them, I think that satisfies the direction. Is that correct?
I think within the context of evaluating extraordinary public benefits, you could say, I don't believe this is providing extraordinary public benefit. They may offer other extraordinary public benefits.
And I think they would, right? There's gonna be several, but I just wanna narrowly go on fire.
So if we wanna say that is an extraordinary public benefit you must provide, period, not like you may provide, then I think that's different than what's in the policy. Like you shall provide versus you may provide.
Yeah, but well, I guess it's the same thing as long as we can say no, and then they have to go back and put one in. Right? This is all for the fire department or I don't know, library if they have some kind of demand.
And-
Police, yeah, police, same thing. Emergency services that we should not pay through a bond later on.
Legally, wouldn't they have to, just to kind of jump in here, say the fire district says there needs to be a fire district out here. We would essentially say, if you're not putting a fire district here, it's not gonna get very far, period, legally speaking.
Well, I think in the
No.
context of development approvals, we would expect that they'd be providing adequate public services.
Right.
And in evaluating our metro district service plan, and I hate to use Turion because I don't wanna single them out, right?
But they're
We're not
so
creating-
big,
We're not
it's
creating a
unique.
policy just to
Yeah.
deal with them, obviously, but
Right.
they're the obvious choice, cause like you said, they're proposed to be a very large development. If the fire district came to us and said, look, we cannot provide service to 5,000 new residences without a new fire district, and we need to work out a deal to make sure that there's a district facility provided to provide fire services, I think in the context of your neighborhood master plan approval, you would be requiring that anyway.
Yep.
Mine's more
And they-
specific to
and
the
they can-
ISO 2 though, cause they can still provide service right now, but to keep that ISO rating, they have to have it, they have to have a station out there. They're already going to I-25 right now and servicing all sides of accidents, but to
And-
keep that ISO 2, they need a station out there.
And I think it's important to remember though, that the fire district collects impact fees to offset or mitigate impacts of growth so that citizens aren't picking up existing residents aren't picking up the tab, right? So the idea is that like, you
I'll
know,
push back on that
it's-
though. I met with them and even Chief tried with the board and it sounds like they don't wanna raise it. So this is kind of a way to get around it, to say, if you guys aren't, I just don't want this to come back on the citizens in 10 years. That we have to pay for growth, cause at the moment it wasn't thought of. I mean, here's an example with the station going in by Berthoud Reservoir. That's on commercial land by the town, you know? If we had this in place then, we could have said Prairie Star or Heron Lakes, you have to put in a station. So it's not on the town, some kind of after the fact thing. Does that make sense?
I think it does. It's challenging in that we are not the fire district,
It is.
right? It's easy for us to say you shall put in water lines that the town will own. It's a different thing to say you shall put in stuff for other people
I wish they were here
that are not owned by the town.
Chief seemed excited when I brought it up to him, but like he said, it was I was thinking everywhere and you know, we worked out this deal on our commercial land for the north end, but it's really now with one major development out by I-25 that I think, and who knows where we're going after this, that we have something in place.
And so I'll read the emergency services provision of the extraordinary benefits section, and then you guys can tell me if you think we've met this. So 2B8 says emergency services couldn't be qualified as an extraordinary public benefit. Meeting challenges for the provision of emergency services previously identified by the town. This includes financing the acquisition or donation of land for facilities that will house emergency vehicles and equipment such as fire stations. Preference will be given for service plans that facilitate the construction of fire stations that will improve the insurance services office rating.
The ISO thing, yeah. Could we just say, I mean,
So
it makes sense if we're
I
gonna,
think the board is making it clear to a developer that there's preference for a service plan that facilitates the construction of a fire station that improves the ISO rating for that area, and then that would be an expected extraordinary benefit in a development where the town has previously identified a need for emergency services infrastructure.
I would just extend that and call it emergency services and not be so specific to fire, because we're gonna have a need for some kind of substation out there for police.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
with the attorneys, we're okay if a big development came to us and they didn't have this listed as an extraordinary benefit. We're okay to say, no, we're not approving this development because
Yeah.
you didn't have the fire station in there or the public safety building in there. That's,
At our sole discretion, what it says in this code verbatim, our sole discretion, we can deny it for any reason we feel valid as a board.
I'm getting a little, just wanna get a little tricky here. We got one shot at this and this was clear direction from the board on the last meeting. So I wanna make sure that that part is covered legally.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't see that as clear direction. I thought I understood what you guys were asking, apparently did not.
This, what sounds like you said, it is similar. I just wanna make sure that I don't want this huge fleet of attorneys saying, whoa, 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 you know, this wasn't clear to us when we made this metro district. Please,
Mayor, if you don't mind, I might comment.
please.
The way that this has been set up is the review that you folks conduct, the evaluation criteria, and this is in section 2. So a review of section 2 sort of gives you the framework here. But the applicant has to demonstrate the ability to deliver public benefits through extraordinary development outcomes. And they have to address environmental sustainability, that's not optional. They also have to address smart growth management and the issues that are contained in the definition of smart growth management. This is on page 3. Part of that is the analysis of critical public infrastructure. Now, that first definition of critical public infrastructure includes things like water and sewer, treatment plants that would serve not just this development, but more broadly speaking, the rest of the town, that type of thing. And then they have to address two of the remaining issues at a minimum, including emergency services, which is drafted broadly to talk about all emergency services. But then there's also an illustration that focuses on fire protection and the ISO rating. So you can kind of picture it as a sort of point system that you would allocate to the proposal.
Yeah.
Got to address environmental sustainability, got to address those related issues. And then you get points allocated for that. And then if you address another two of these to produce an extraordinary development outcome, that obviously boosts your point total in a sense.
Sure.
And so it's for you folks to weigh.
So that's the way. So like Mayor Pro Tem is saying, if they didn't come in, so I don't know why we're not requiring public safety to be extraordinary, but I think that just should be a given. But if we're not,
The reason why it's not required is because it doesn't apply to every project.
but you could make the argument that it doesn't, yeah, okay.
Cause not every project's gonna need to build a fire or police station or an ambulance service. I mean, and so that's why it's one of the extraordinary benefits they can demonstrate. I can say from having met with
Okay, that
several
makes sense.
developers about the formation of service plans, they will gladly agree to pay for things that they think are both necessary for the development, that improve their development, and that the town needs if they get their service plan approved. I mean, I think I would be shocked if we ever came to you and said a development like Turion or any other project in town that proposed to build something, the fire district said, we really need fire services out here. And the developer said, no chance am I including that in the service plan. I'd be shocked that that would happen.
Well, and somehow it
So
happened with Heron Lakes, right? That we're using commercial land now that, granted,
they were never asked to put one in.
that's what I'm saying. So if we had this then,
I think even had they been asked to put one in when their service plan was approved,
they would have done it.
there's a high likelihood they might have just said yes. I think they just weren't asked at the time when that happened, whenever it was 10 years ago or however long it was.
Okay, so it sounds like, to be clear, we can deny them if that's not, to be very specific to a public safety building. If that's not in there, we could deny it, even though it's a kind of an option.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a weighing process. You have the discretion to weigh these criteria, and that's a perfectly valid factor to look to
Excellent,
to
thank you.
disapprove something.
Thank you. Try to be so incredibly specific.
Oh,
I just
know.
wanted to make sure I had one shot at that.
I totally get it,
It's really
yeah.
important.
That's absolutely reasonable. So the same is gonna be true for the next one. The next section below emergency services was water supply and storage. And districts that that propose to acquire a stable and adequate supply of water sufficient to meet the needs of development within districts in an environmentally friendly manner that encourages water conservation and reuse could be considered a public benefit. Now, that one's kind of a weird one in that they're obligated to bring a stable supply of water either through dedication or cash in lieu already. So there's some extra provisions in there, and I think they would have to go above and beyond to demonstrate. I can think of some instances where we might be acquiring a new water source that would be very difficult and expensive for us to incorporate into our existing water portfolio. And if they were gonna fund that, that would absolutely be an extraordinary public benefit. Because that would open up that particular water source to our portfolio in a way that we couldn't maybe do on our own. But they would have to demonstrate that to you, and again, you would have the discretion to say, this is not an extraordinary public benefit, all you're doing is providing the water you're required to provide, and that doesn't count. And so I think that gives you that caveat. But it also gives the developer the opportunity to say, hey, we've come up with a really creative water solution that might be way too expensive for the town to provide, but it benefits our development and it benefits the town, and here's how. And then you could say, we agree, or not.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I think the idea behind that one, correct me, Trustee Ayers, we might have different opinions on that, but was if we're requiring wet water with our new policy, with the hybrid policy, that, it could be exorbitant, but maybe they could use the Metro District to fund that.
And I think I think they have the opportunity to do that anyway. They could just use it as an extraordinary public benefit in your evaluation of their service plan. If they were providing something above and beyond what would be minimum
minimum.
But they can already use the metro district to fund water acquisition?
I believe that's true.
Okay, cool. Alright, well,
Does that be like buying water rights or building reservoirs or?
All of the above.
Okay.
So if they said, hey, we're not just gonna provide water, but we're gonna build a large storage reservoir on our property that the town's gonna benefit from, and it's gonna benefit our development, we're gonna use it for non-pot or whatever, that might be an extraordinary public benefit, much beyond just providing water to serve their development.
yeah, I can see that.
So limiting metro district continuance when development doesn't occur. Section 4FC was added to require dissolution of a district when a period of 5 years without substantial development activity has passed. There are some caveats to that, but sorry, I'm scrolling down here so I can keep up. But that may be extended or altered upon a majority vote of the town board of trustees. So if a developer came in and said, hey, here's all the reasons why, the board could extend that deadline,
So,
but otherwise, the district should be dissolved as soon as practical, after a period of 5 or more years without any substantial
so
development
if they come in
activity.
with like a 25-year build out plan and they wanna do metro district approval for the entire thing,
I-
that would basically kill most of the districts after 5 years, cause they haven't started building those areas yet.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the intent.
So would this then force them to only get approval on metro districts in like the first couple phases, and then they come back later and we'd approve metro districts in the later phases?
No, this would be more applicable to, let's say a development was approved and a service plan was approved and they didn't build any infrastructure for 5 years, they didn't do anything. If they started and they've invested, millions in infrastructure in their first phase, that would be substantial development activity within the district.
Okay, so it's
So
not
it's
based
not-
district
it's
on
not like-
district, it's based on the entire service plan.
It would be based on the service plan for that district. Yeah. Even if there were some sub-districts included as part of that.
I said a substantial, I know it's kind of broad, and I think it's designed to be as such, but, I mean, from your perspective, what would be a substantial amount of development? Would it be all the water lines have been dug? Would it be a house has been built? Would it be?
Put a stop sign up?
Yeah, I mean, it's, what do you consider to be substantial? Because I guess the argument could be like, we considered, we put in water lines, that's a substantial investment, but we haven't touched it for 10 years. But we're still, we nixed this one off, we can keep kicking this can down the road.
So we don't have the ability to dissolve the district.
Sure.
We couldn't just do that unilaterally and just decide one day they hadn't done enough development. But the expectation is the way that the service plan would be written, that there would be a provision that a district should be dissolved as soon as practical if this hasn't occurred. Now, I think we could notify them that we don't believe substantial development activity has occurred and it's been a period of 5 years and per their service plan, district dissolution should occur. They would then, I'm sure, request an extension.
Now, is it 5 years of inactivity?
The board with a majority vote could choose to do that.
Cause what if they did build something and then they stopped building for like 6 years?
I think this is one of those cases where we could what if it to death. And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all, but it's really hard to conceive of every possible scenario under which this might be a problem. And I think what we want is some tool to say, hey, 5 years without substantial development activity has passed.
20 years.
Yeah, or 20 years, and therefore your district should have been dissolved and should be dissolved. Again, they're gonna have the opportunity to come in and make a request that district be extended, and it can be on a majority vote of the board under the policy and the way that service plan would be approved. And I think the definition of substantial development activity would probably be what a jury or a judge would agree to if we got to that place.
So they just put like a stop sign, obviously, that's not substantial. If they put water lines, that's a heck of a bigger investment. And while, something happened, arguably it was a bigger change to that plan than, just throwing a couple trees down saying it looks good.
There would have to be some reasonableness involved
Sure.
in our application of that. But if the developer fought us, then I think our only opportunity would then be to go to court and argue that.
No, that's the thing that I'm trying to get is like, sometimes we get these developments come in, we've got quite a few of the PUDs around the town that were approved and passed, and they could have started building the next day, but here they are 20, 30 years later, coming back to the table saying, hey, we must start building now. Nothing was done on that timeframe.
Thank you for putting this in, by the way. I know this is something I think somebody brought up, but I know this is, dealing with Ludlow, dealing with Turion, a lot of these things where it's been done and we're dealing with it 20 years later. This is an attempt to help prevent this being, sins of the father are absorbed by the son kind of presented.
In fairness to Ludlow Farms, they don't have an approved service plan.
Oh, no, totally. But it's mostly just to make sure like, hey, we're gonna do this, we approve it, and then we hear nothing for a decade. And then Earth starts moving and everyone's upset about it, so.
That's kind of where I was going with metro districts, is like, when do we approve a metro district? Do we approve it in the beginning, do we, middle, the end, after we've seen what they're actually gonna promise and build? Cause I felt like sometimes we've approved metro districts too soon, and then they come back to the table later on and their plans completely changed. It's like, well, wait a sec, I approved a metro district based on
I think we are
the
changing
initial
that.
things.
That's why we were requiring, that's why we're gonna require, assuming that you approve this policy, an approved neighborhood master plan first.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think
So
this is
that,
good
so that
too.
we're
This
not
protects
approving,
us.
we're not approving
And
service
that's why I
plans
like this,
without.
this goes hand in
development.
hand with that other part. I saw that in there, I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
Did I state all that appropriately?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And one of the most important checks is that approval of the master plan first. And then metro districts after the master plan has been approved. That's surprisingly rare.
Huh.
I've not seen that often before. And,
Do you think it's a good thing, you think?
oh, absolutely.
Good, okay, I do too.
Cause it gives all.
Otherwise, they're gonna say the maximum amount and then you come in and you get nothing out of it.
That's what you usually get,
Yeah.
is the huge pie in the sky, this is gonna be the Paris on the
Yeah.
Plat, and then
Next board comes along and, hey, you might get a little shed.
And I think there are, I'm not gonna name any, you guys already know, there are districts in town who kind of promised the world in the early phases and then didn't build, I think and I think they would argue they never said they were gonna build the things that we believed they were gonna build, and that's because they weren't part of a required approval like a neighborhood master plan. With the neighborhood master plan, we could say, we all agreed on what you were gonna build, we all knew what you were gonna build. And your service plan was designed to construct all of those improvements. So you can't come back later and go, no, we never really intended to build that amenity center as part of the pool. Yes, you did, it was in your neighborhood master plan approval.
So this theoretically bait and switch proofs a lot of what we're gonna do and what we're gonna say, not lining
Yeah,
up.
I mean, to be honest, I think the most important change in this metro district policy is the neighborhood master plan approval prior to service plan approval.
Yep.
All the rest of it is good stuff, that one will solve a lot of the concerns I think that we've had in the past. Irrespective of kind of the weird loopholes that everybody can manipulate that are probably well beyond what I even understand. Reiterating and clarifying bid noticing requirements, there are some statutory requirements anyway, but section 4J2 was amended to specify public bidding requirements for all construction contracts involving $60,000 or more public monies. Reiterating and clarifying that districts must allow public access, section 4J6 was added to require that the service plan include provisions for all public facilities that are financed, constructed, maintained, and operated by the district to be open to the public.
Well, it was more specific than that. It was to disclose on the actual site how to contact it and also how to pay.
Yeah,
And they will get around, I am no expert, you are, I have a feeling they will get around this because they don't wanna say.
that might be true.
It is true at Heritage Ridge and it is true at Prairie Star. They don't, the feeling is that we're in this, we're paying for it, the public shouldn't have access. That's why it's so
Or they're
hard.
gonna jack the price up so high that the public wouldn't wanna pay the price
Well,
that
that's,
they're gonna charge.
in my opinion, that's,
fair, right?
yeah, that's still different, I should pay a higher rate, but it is so hard to figure out how to stand
But
up
at a
paddleboard
reasonable rate.
how to stand up paddleboard at the golf course, and I think part of this was to make it very clear on how to get on there.
And that information is on their website. It's not easy to find.
It isn't.
And it is expensive, but it is out there. And so I think it's hard to also say it must be on this page and it must be in this format and it must be, that is a very tough thing to include in a service plan approval in the beginning. I think making sure that it says there's an acknowledgement in the service plan that all these facilities are open to the public. Then I think there's another piece here. I'll just click to the next one. Having a town liaison identified for metro district coordination complaints. Adding and clarifying the town's intention to exercise oversight of the districts to the maximum extent permitted by law. including designating a member of staff to act as a liaison to district, gives us that chance to go, hey, look, your service plan says it's open to the public. We've received complaints that it is impossible to find information about how you access these facilities. We fully intend to regulate you under the maximum extent permitted by law, and as our staff liaison, we're gonna work with you to get this in the right way, in a way that makes sense on your website so that people can find that information.
Well, I just think we could be a little bit more, cause they could say you have to come in at Sunday between 3 and 4 PM in cash and pay us. We could say, here's a link, you have to have an easy, accessible way for the public to pay.
What if, and to that point, what if there's, that last piece is amended to have essentially all that information shall be posted on that amenity offered
Yeah.
in a reasonable and visible spot?
Mhm.
So they can put it,
When you go to a state park, you see a
Right.
sign that says
Yes.
daily rate is $45.
well, it's more like, you know, you go anywhere there's, you know, any kind of workers thing, they have to have posted, like workers' comp posters. Has to be there, has to be visible, has to be in a
Yeah.
public spot, and that's written in the law.
There should be an easy way to pay the fee,
Right, but I
whether it be
mean,
electronically.
it kind of shorts out the, oh, it has to be on a website. Well, it shall be posted on that physical amenity, wherever it is, in a visible spot to the public and accurately maintained. I don't think that puts an undue burden on them. I don't think that would be an unnecessary request, because, I mean, I know Heritage Ridge, yeah, when the pools were closed, like trying to get a hold of anybody or anything to get into those pools, cause you know, town pool got closed. You know, it was playing, you know, you were chasing your own tail.
Yeah.
But this would, in theory, address that in the best way that we could possibly ask for.
I agree, cause right now they could say, well, we're doing it to the this staff member could only say the maximum extent possible, and the Metro District could say, we do it on page 267 at the bottom in 8-point font, you know, on how to do it. We just gotta make it very obvious. I love the idea of having it on the amenity, having it in a publicly accessible spot.
Just
and
like
how to
any
do
other
it.
public accessible spot.
Yeah.
They post the fees and rates and hours of operation.
Is that,
So that would apply to parks and everything, trails.
Anything that we have to pay extra for, but as a member of the public, we should be entitled to access to.
Unless it's a gated community, but
We don't allow those.
you know, we
Yeah.
aren't allowed any gated
the
communities.
idea was essentially a pool, like you walk up and it's somewhere publicly visible.
Yeah,
But
and I
obviously-
think there are some obvious examples where I think that works. I'm just trying to think through, are there others where maybe that doesn't apply, but maybe that's not
And
worth
that's where
worrying
we can
about.
make sure that they aren't gonna just inflate the price to the point where the public wouldn't wanna use the property.
I don't,
Like if the market going rate for the use of a lake is $10 at the state park or county park,
yeah,
you
but
can't be charging $85 for
I
the
don't,
lake.
I don't think it's quite that clear, and maybe Attorney Norton or Attorney Smith can weigh in if I get this wrong, but it doesn't have to be a quote market rate. It can be, this is how much it costs a resident via property taxes, mill levies and other things to use that facility, and that I think they have the right to set rates in ways that we probably don't have direct control over. Maybe is a better way to say it.
Can we get legal
I don't know that we
clarification
can
on that?
require them to set a rate at something we say is
No, not,
reasonable.
but we could say reasonable, right? Cause,
I think that's already
You'd have to-
expected under the law anyway.
well, but that's the point was that Tim's point is, I think, that's a good
I've
point,
been
that they
hearing
could say
complaints
$200 to
about
go
public
paddleboarding.
facilities,
And we could push
the
back
rate's
already?
so priced high that it's not.
I guess the question then becomes what's reasonable.
Yeah, right. They'd have to
That's
show the
subjective.
books on this is what it costs. Your $200 to go paddleboarding for 30 minutes is needed for this and that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
But this is only so important, I think, because we get, at least I get a lot of this is, oh, it's open to the public, and then where is it and how to pay, and oh my gosh, and it's like, so if we want development to be liked by the neighbors, we wanna make sure that it's easy for them to use the amenities, not something that we're kind of another bait and switch, that they get in there and, oh.
But we also wanna make sure that people who are not paying taxes for those amenities also contribute a reasonable share.
Absolutely.
So that
It-
people
it
who
could
are
be a
paying
higher
for
amount.
it aren't saying, well, why do I gotta pay all this money for this amenity and everybody in the public gets to come here for free? Which I know isn't what we're suggesting, but I mean, there has to be
Yeah.
that reasonableness in that.
Right, reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible to, first off, I think you have to separate the information component that we're trying to address. And I think I would just defer to the board and to Chris on how practically that would work. You can definitely see that would work with a pool, because a pool is there
there's probably some doorway to that pool or some entryway to that pool. And that seems to make a lot of sense, right? How you could give information about the hours, a contact person, and the rates. So that seems like it could make some sense.
Yeah, post, like Mike said, posting on the actual facility, so
Right.
which would make sense for a clubhouse.
Right. Or clubhouse, pool. I think we have to definitely separate out the rate setting, and having any sort of jurisdiction over a separate political subdivision and its rate setting. Typically, in the law isn't maybe developed in this area as well as we might like it, but there is law that says that rate setting for whatever the facility is, or rate setting for utilities especially, are a matter of legislative discretion of the body that makes those rates. So
that
you
would be
wouldn't
the
have,
metro.
you wouldn't have one, you wouldn't have the town be able to direct the legislative rate setting authority of the special district. Charles might feel differently because we're talking about an amenity as opposed to a utility. And so far, those cases are pretty specific to utilities and the legislative prerogative of the utility owner being able to set those rates. But I do think it'd be difficult to impose in the service plan the town telling them you can't set a rate higher than this.
No, yeah, I get that.
And
I just
do
wonder if we
think-
could say we can just put reasonable in there and then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's an unreasonable provision to put in. Yeah, I don't think
Love
that's a
the word
hard thing to say. That public should be,
It'd be set higher than the district members, but it has to be at a reasonable rate.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to want to use their rates like anybody would when they start to see that certain hours they're getting a lot of use.
Yeah.
Or, certain types of, so they're gonna wanna set those rates in a way that help moderate the use of the amenity.
But not so high as to just exclude, arbitrarily exclude.
Well, I don't think we have an ability
To cap it.
cap it.
and that starts to be,
But then it's almost like not public. If you really didn't want it public there, you just set the rate at $1,000.
Yeah.
I think if we include some language in there about operated by the district, be open to the public, and that fees charged for non-district residents to use the facility should be shall be reasonable. Yeah, I don't know where our legal recourse is if they set $1,000 fee to go to the pool.
And maybe they wouldn't. I just wonder with some of these guys, it is kind of clear they're actively not wanting you there.
And it is not cheap to use some of the facilities in town.
Sure.
Where that information is easy to find, so.
But we could at least
The
definitely
question
do
of
the.
whether or not that's reasonable is, I'm not sure, I guess that's.
They'd have to show you the staff books or something and say this is why we're doing this.
We'd have to go through.
Explainable or something like that.
And I think within the context of the liaison relationship, just reviewing annual reports, how's that all written? I was gonna pull that back up. Reviewing annual reports, evaluating compliance of the districts with the service plan, representatives of the district should be expected to meet with the staff liaison as an as-needed basis, and no less than annually. Like, I think there's some expectation that the town's gonna have some input and involvement in how those are managed. And then I guess we just have to fight if we felt like their fees were ludicrously expensive. I mean, there's just not, I don't know that there's any other way to handle that.
Sure. And then requiring the payment to be accessible. Hopefully hopefully that means electronically as well, so you don't
Yeah, and I
pay with
think,
the card.
I don't think that's a hard thing to include either, that, fees for use of the facilities shall be, available on the district website and posted at facilities where those fees are required.
Can we get that in tonight? Because that was part of the direction too,
Yeah.
was to have that.
I think so.
Yep.
Okay. And, sorry.
Mayor
Yes,
Karsbeck,
Christopher.
we're approaching 10:30.
Keep
Could I
going.
make a motion
Yes,
to
please.
continue to on or before 10:30?
Thank you. Trustee Murphy has moved on that. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, trustee Ayers is seconded. Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Hardy,
Yeah.
Trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes, thank you for doing that.
Yes.
All right, anything else on that one?
So we've already talked about 6, having a liaison. 7, districts demonstrating to the town varying levels of public benefits. Section 4J2 was amended to include a requirement for applicants to show different costs and consequent debt service requirements for different levels of amenity and public improvements within a district. And then last, having Metro District information available on our website. All the Metro Districts in town now are on our website. They're under the resident tab. And that links to the state website that has all the Metro District information, who's on the board, what's their web address.
Good.
So that residents can easily find that information if they don't already know.
So it's not generic metro information, it's specific to,
Specific to each.
if I want to
Metro
find my
District.
president, I could do that or something. Okay.
And that's it. And then associated adjustments were made to the IGA, the master IGA as part of the policy.
What was the last part?
There's a master IGA or template that's included as part of the policy. The developer's expected to, or a district is expected to enter into with the town. Associated changes were made to that master IGA.
Excellent. Trustees, any questions or comments? I'll open it up to the public too, but just right now.
We do questions first and then comments or?
Sure, let's do that. Good questions.
I guess just as a general awareness question, say you proceed with this, Metro District comes in, we approve it, the IGA is signed and agreed upon. Say something goes on and they decide that they disregard that. I guess there's varying degrees of infraction on that, up to and including fines or things like that. So essentially they violate the IGA. What, in your perspective, any changes, like is a general punishment for a violation? Is it we take it to court? Are they dissolved? Is it a huge fine? What does that look like? Just so we know what the teeth look like.
Yeah, I think as a practical matter, you use the threat of a suit to negotiate compliance.
Sure.
I think that's typically how to look at this. The Special District Act allows you to seek an injunction anyway if there's a material modification or deviation from a service plan. Part of what this agreement is intended to do is to give you a whole array of contract remedies as well, which would include injunctive relief, damages, and so forth to enforce the agreement. But as you pointed out, typically you want to use a carrot and stick approach. Always have the stick in your back pocket. I think these are serious lawsuits. I think the enforcement mechanism would be taken seriously, but ideally you try to bring folks into compliance.
Sure, no, totally, yeah. Okay.
With landscaping, that problem's resolved with new things? Or do we need to have something in here that you will have a budget for landscaping sufficient to replace all your greenery?
Yeah, so we already included language that says the developer has to enter into a reimbursement agreement for landscaping so that they fund landscape maintenance in the early phases of the district until there's sufficient funds to take over that landscaping. There's also a tree replacement policy that the service plan has to the district shall be required to replace trees or shrubs when 40% or more of the plant is dead. Final condition of the trees or shrubs shall be made by the forester employed by or retained by the town to administer the town's urban forest. So there's some stricter guidelines about trees and tree replacement.
Okay.
So that there's not an argument about like, well, just because it was in our landscape plan doesn't mean we're required to put it back if it dies. We don't have, the service plan would require them to do that.
So this will impel them to have a budget for that then too.
Yeah, and they already have a budget for maintenance. The problem is that often early in the development, the budget for maintenance isn't
Yeah.
sufficient.
I think that should be on the
And
developer.
so that is on the developer in
that's
the way
great.
this is written. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I guess the only other question, this is just kind of going into the IGA section of 4.0 through the control district, does have may and may not to be employed. Essentially, this is, kind of comes back to us of like, they would like a control district. Here's what the IGA would look like if they do or do not want, if they want this. Essentially, it would be written there, but we would approve whether or not it's, you know, yes, you get a control district, or no, your request for control district is denied because we don't think it's an adequate use of your resources. But that's intentionally put in 4.03, so that way they can still ask for it, we can still deny it. Say if you.
It gives them the ability to ask.
Sure.
The policy is really clear that the town strongly discourages and will not give preference to control districts, but that they have the opportunity to ask for one if they wanna come in and try to justify why that's necessary.
Cool. And then I guess the only other one, I know the last time we brought this up was bidding requirements, and this actually was specifically called out in 203, making sure that you don't have developers who live on site essentially continuously bidding and absorbing some of that metro district income. Being a benefit of that was specifically called out in 203 to prevent kind of double dipping, so to speak. So the question there was, you guys are great at listening, I should learn more.
Is there a reason why we just didn't say service districts or must just make it a policy that they have to allow citizens to be on the board? Cause it seems like they're gonna be wanting to have that master service district regardless from all the past experience of metro districts we've got currently. Can we just say that it's not limited to just the board members, it's actually open to any citizen living within the development?
Yeah,
Or in some cases, a business owner that owns property within the metro district?
yeah, a couple responses. First of all these policies, including this one, are designed to give you folks the maximum flexibility that we think you can have at law to decide which proposals to accept and which not to. And so the effort is not to enable them, it's to not handcuff you. And there are instances where a control district makes sense. There are instances where it makes sense early because you don't have anybody that's qualified to serve on the board during those early years before a house is constructed and it's a single developer project. They're the only ones who can qualify board members. And remember,
I prefer to use
corporations,
the term eligible rather than qualified, cause there's sometimes I've looked at these boards and.
yeah, the statute
Like-
uses both, but yeah, I hear you absolutely.
There's a lot of times they're not qualified.
But it's absolutely the case that you have to be a person, you have to be a human being to serve on a special district board. And that's what creates as much of the complexity in this whole structure as anything.
Cause I'm just thinking ahead to future boards that may not have invested the amount of time that we have in understanding what a metro district is, what it does. And they'd be like, oh, sure, service district, alright, sounds good. And, you know, they're a new member on the board 10 years down the line and this is kind of dwindled up. But who knows, maybe in 10 years, our state House of Representatives will bundle this all up nice and easily and it'll be easier to just say, yeah, sure, you know, but right now, there's so many little holes in the scene that just drive me nuts that.
No, I understand completely. And it really, that issue of who is eligible to serve on the board and the fact that it has to be a human being.
It's a sad state that you have to say that. And someone's trying to put their dog on the board or something.
Well, and you know, there are interesting alternatives. So for example, in a business improvement district, you know, if you folks had a business improvement district in your downtown, you can have business representation. You can say, my law firm designates Aaron Smith to serve as our elector and she'll cast our vote and we'll serve on the board and qualify somebody to do that. But the legislature's never done that with these Title 32 districts. Even the ones that are commercial, even the ones that are businesses that are located within the district exclusively, they've never said you can have business entity representation.
Yeah, cause like even when someone called me about how to deal with their metro district and an issue that they were having, I looked up their metro district, found it so I could send them the link. And when I was looking at the board, you could definitely tell that the board was made up of spouses. So it's like, it's kind of like, oh, okay, so spouses on there.
Legally allowed though.
Yeah, because they can be appointed or elected.
Yep.
Yeah. The language
But
is
it's kind of
someone
interesting to see
who
who
or,
makes up the boards on some of these metro districts.
yeah, the language is someone who or whose spouse owns taxable real or personal property within the boundaries of the district. So,
So it's like 3 couples. I don't know if that's in existence today, but yeah, it
No,
can
it's-
feasibly be 3 couples.
it's still pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? I'll open it up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience or online that would like to speak to this?
There is no one online, Your Honor.
Okay, I'll close it, bring it back to the board. This is a bear. How do we all feel? Trustee Ayers?
I mean, a lot of this is beyond me, but it seems like it's very detailed, and I understand the difficulty of making things as detailed as possible while also making them as vague as possible so that you can work around specific issues. I appreciate the 8 points that were addressed. And I think that it is a good thing and a rather important thing that we're coming up with this list of things that districts have to negotiate with the town in order to be considered, which, you know, hasn't happened in the past, and I think that's gotten us into some trouble, and at the very least, this provides a baseline for us to have further conversations about each district independently. So I think this is a good step in the right direction, and I'm in favor.
Trustee Murphy?
You know, I wanna commend everyone that's worked on this. It is bare of a policy, you know, I think it crosses all the Ts and dots the Is. I don't pretend that this is perfect, but I think this policy is one of the best I've seen come out of this town. And I fully support implementing it.
All right. Trustee Hardy?
It's a lot to digest. I don't know if I'm ready to vote on it yet tonight, so I wanna kind of read it and digest it. I'd still like to get input from some of the opposition side. We've always heard the pros from the developer side and the attorney sides. I'd still like to get some feedback from those that are trying to do their best to plug all the holes in metro districts, like House Representative Mike Weissman. But from going from the point of wanting to flat out, I don't wanna have metro districts in our community. It's something, and it's definitely starting to grow on me a little bit, but it's still a lot to digest, and I don't feel comfortable voting for it yet tonight myself, but that's just where I sit, cause I really wanna overanalyze it and ask all the what ifs as much as possible, and just make sure that we are protecting the homeowners as best we can. I'd like to see more definitions in there, maybe for affordable housing. Specifications is, you know, something that's of extraordinary value. I know I asked this question once before about, you know, if they come in and do a master plan and have 14 districts, could 1 or 2 of those districts be exempt from payment so that they could put affordable housing in there to, you know, sort of thing. That'd be really up to the developer whether they'd wanna do that or not, but those are just some thoughts that I've
They're
had over
good
the course
points.
of doing all this stuff. It's like, you know, hey, you know, we're gonna build affordable housing in this one district, they'll be exempt from, they won't be in a metro district, we won't put a metro district in that zone for that purpose, so that they can keep their housing costs down. But those are just some ideas that I've passed around that still would like to try and see. And yeah. Without talking more than I need to.
Well, no, I get you.
That's kind of where I'm at.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Still.
I mean, it's a complicated piece of legislation that's moving. It's been moving regularly between state and our ability to kind of determine what is and isn't gonna be a problem. I know this has been something that this board has been dealing with since before I was even on this board. Yeah, you know, it's a fun marathon, or kind of a death march, depends on your perspective on it. It never seems to stop, but to that point, I would hesitate saying that we should continue kicking the can down the road, not because we can't get it better, but I think in this instance, perfection can be the enemy of good. And in this instance, you know, we could continually remeasure, reweigh, figure out what's affordable, what's not affordable, what could be possible. And we'll be here 5 years from now, continually weighing out benefits of what can and cannot happen, what does and doesn't feel right. And I hear you. I know we want to make sure we're protecting the town, we're protecting the people who live there as much as humanly possible. But you know, there's a point where we finally have to say, you know, this is as good as we can get it. And we can come back. We can edit this if we start seeing problems. It can be changed, and we'll even have a better guideline for this. But I think having a running model of probably the most aggressive and board-friendly legislation regarding metro districts that I'm aware of is probably a good choice for the evening, in my opinion. That isn't to say that the work is done. Obviously, it's not. But I think at this point in time, I think we can at least put this thing in the water and see how well it holds up. See where the holes are, and we can start plugging from there. Because we won't know until it actually, we go put it to use. My personal opinion.
I feel very similar. Once I learned that we can't ban them, I'm not a fan of these things, but once you made that very clear, we can't. It's kind of just working within the system of what we can do, and I appreciate all the work on giving us this flexibility. I would be hesitant too, Trustee Hardy. I would just love to see what else we could do here. Mayor Pro Tem, I think you nailed the other side of that, though. That we can always stop it again. Unfortunately, that'll have to be after probably another development or so gets approved, and we see where we missed. But we can always stop it and put another moratorium in and look on how we can improve it. Neither of the absent trustees commented or went out of their way to contact me, or I don't know if any of you guys on this, so I hope that they don't have anything pressing that they couldn't say tonight because they weren't here. I'd imagine if they did, they would have contacted one of us. And I hope we could still reach out to Mr. Weissman. I know we've been trying several times, but maybe he could still, even though if we did approve this, he could give his thoughts on it.
I'd like to email him.
Yeah, well, you just, like Attorney Smith said, he's, as a citizen, there's no, only two can meet with state, you know, so you and him can meet. You know? There's no open meeting requirement on that, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, personally, I guess I'm in favor of going ahead with this tonight. Is there anything else from the board?
To kind of comment on Trustee Murphy's bit, I know we typically look around to our neighbors across the state and around that are dealing with other issues and kind of absorb their ideas and their legislation. I hope that ours kind of helps set a precedent in the neighborhood of like, hey, they had a really good plan here, and ours is actually copied because it's such a well thought through plan that enables us to be better stewards of a very complicated legal process.
Yeah, and maybe it's just that these have been abused so much in the past that I just initially don't want to have them go.
Oh, yeah.
But if these could really truly be used just for extraordinary things, that's where I think you could make it an incredible development to the point where the neighbors,
Like how we raised the bar high enough.
yeah, right, aren't opposed to it because they see so many cool things about it that, hey, I want to walk my dog in there, and that's only because of Metro District made that possible.
The way this thing is written up, we can turn it down for any reason we feel is reasonable. And that is what we've always wanted. Beforehand, it was a yes or no, and that was just the end of the story. And this gives us so much more leeway saying, oh, you want to put a fire district there, that's cool, but that's kind of standard for this many people. What if we did this instead, and that we could actually be, work
We've always been able
collaboratively.
to vote it down in the past,
Oh,
but
right.
now we just have criteria as to why we're.
Exactly, and this gives us the ultimate
good point.
yes or no. Likewise, we can say, well, this is cool, but we would rather you do this instead. They come back and it keeps that conversation going, it turns it into a dialogue instead of us versus developer that we're scared they're gonna screw us.
Yeah.
This at least allows us to have a better,
Gives us
more
some-
muscle in this argument and in this process.
If anyone wanted to move on this, Administrator Kirk or Attorney Smith, how do we include those things about do we wanna have to state that specifically in the motion about noticing for amenity hours, pricing, we have to do all that?
Yes, I mean, I think what you can do is just move to approve the resolution. And in connection with that, direct the attorney and town administrator to rephrase or amend and add the language to paragraph 6,
Or J6.
4J6 on page 8. And I think it was very clear that language would be that fees shall be reasonable and posted on the website and the facility where the fees are charged,
In a public and legible area.
public and legible.
Yeah.
Accessible.
Publicly accessible and legible area, cause you know, they can make it public, but they'll put it really tiny font. You can't read it.
It's like the complaint form.
Exactly, yeah.
Do we need to read all that, or can we just say as the attorney described? or
As
something?
attorney described will suffice, thank you. As further explained.
It's further
Mayor Pro
explained by
Tem.
the town attorney. Anyone take a stab at that? Sure. Alright,
I move to approve resolution 2023-7, a resolution of the town of trustees approving the Berthoud Metropolitan District policy and direct the town attorney and administrator to amend language to paragraph 4J6, page 8, as explained by the town attorney.
alright, Mayor Pro Tem Grace has moved on this, trustee Murphy has seconded. Is there any final discussion by the trustees or any amendments? Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
trustee Hardy,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Alright, this has been approved. We can move on now to reports. We'll go into an executive session and possibly come back after that. So we'll start off with, let's keep on going right to left. Trustee Ayers.
So Port Committee met last week. The major point of the night was an update on the trails around town. I can have more specific details if you guys
I'd
want,
love
but in the interest of time, I can just give you the sort of 30,000 foot.
Sure.
The main points that the committee asked that parks move towards in the upcoming budget cycle were to look at and try to develop crossings across 287. There's a lot of comments about the town not being connected east to west because of the highway. The other one was the Spartan connection to the east across the railroad tracks. Completing the Rookery Trail because that's gonna be seasonal, but it's a nice park over there, and that's got a lot of focus from the comments. And there was an update on there were a lot of questions and a focus on the Loveland to Front Range Trail, but we are still waiting on Loveland because they're having some issues with some local landowners and the Eagle's Nest. So they'll get back to us when they figured out the actual path that it's gonna take. We can't really move forward until they figure out where the connection is gonna be. Second phase of the bike park has begun, possibly late summer for it to be completed and open, which is pretty nice. The sports program, I know we had gotten a couple comments from that about people concerned about the coaching situation and the just general sports program around town. But there have been 3 new staff hires for that, so hopefully some of the issues are gonna move forward with more I guess ease of access and ease of developing the sports programs for the kids. Yeah. I guess the question that they had was some things about the trails came up and they were wondering if there was a specific timeline for the possible mobility hub out by 287.
Mobility hub. I don't think there's even a plan for mobility. You mean just like a transit stop?
The transit stop, the connector.
Are we in contact with transport? I contacted him as a trustee like 5 years ago. It just on a phone call and they said you have to have a stop out there for us to stop at. I don't know if staff has.
Yeah, so I mean, our goal would be to, I think in the context of microtransit opportunities that we're pursuing, that would be regularly used microtransit destination. And to the extent there was enough, we could use our existing buses or shuttles to run a kind of point to point back to the mobility hub. Is that what you're asking?
No, he's talking about basically a bus stop on 287.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the mobility hub on I-25.
Right.
No, 285.
287.
No, I-25.
Oh,
Yeah.
when's the mobility hub gonna open?
Mm-hmm.
2024, and I think service, open or service, I think is 2025.
That's my understanding
Yeah.
from them as well, yeah.
Cause they had a separate between opening and service, which is weird, because to me, they'd be the same date.
Cause I think a lot of the conversation happened about, did we wanna put energy into, having bike peg infrastructure go east, but there wasn't really a point if there wasn't a place to go to. So that was just a major question for the members of the committee.
Well, there's the Little Thompson Trail, that's going east, is that?
Right, but that's more recreational. I think they were looking
Commuter
for.
trail,
Yeah, a commuter trail or a more,
56.
Hey, don't we have that on the Main Street overlay?
We had talked about it,
There's
doing a
bike and,
trail.
there's
Like
bike and
Farmstead's
pedestrian
talked about
infrastructure
doing
plan as
trail,
part of the Mountain Avenue plan.
But we don't have a formal trail or transportation.
No.
We should have.
I mean, there's a bike lane on the highway, but no one really wants to.
No one wants to die.
Well, I've ridden that for years.
And then the only other thing I had is, as many of you got emails from the resident who was concerned about off-leash dogs, and I said that I would bring that up today. What, I guess, pushback can the town give in that regard for the public safety of off-leash dogs? Is it we have to call the Larimer County, to take care of that, or is it code enforcement, or?
It's a combination of all the above. I think the resident was requesting that we would do more public outreach and education, letting people know where you can have a dog off leash and where you cannot. And that's an easy thing to do. We're already kind of working on that.
Yeah, we've already done it once or twice before.
You know, from an
Yeah.
enforcement perspective, it's code enforcement or Larimer County Humane Society, who is our animal control division.
Okay, that's what I said, but I just wanted to make sure, but, and I think that's all I have for tonight.
I had some questions, so with Port, just want to double check that this is correct information. So we, with Jiskowski, we have reached out to Colorado Open Lands with a plan, sounds like?
Yes.
Multiple times.
We have. So is there, they can't be this absent. What's our next step here? If it's just been months that they're not responding to emails and phone calls or something?
I honestly haven't asked Keith. I know he's reached out to them and I think has been in contact with them about the kind of preferred plans for Jiskowski that the board committee articulated, and I honestly haven't asked him, so maybe that Carl.
The issue as far as I understand with Open Lands is they said, well, bring us something and we'll tell you if you can do it.
Yeah.
And then we'll say, well, we can't really bring you anything until you tell us what we can use the property for. And they said, well, bring us something and we'll tell you if you can do it. And that's just been kind of a back and forth for basically a year and a half. So I think Open Lands needs more direction from us or from Port to say, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z on this property very specifically.
Yeah.
And so Port is kind of, they've pushed up to us. They were interested in disc golf, or they were interested in maybe like a dog park / open space or something like that. But the issue with that is those buildings out front provide a security problem because you can't see the park or a possible park with those buildings there. So what do you want to do with the buildings? And so it's just kind of in this loop of what do you want to do, but we can't figure out what we want to do because Open Lands needs us to tell them what we want to do.
So could we, just a suggestion here, could we just get a Google Maps, put 9 holes randomly on there and send it over? Not spend $100,000 on a professional design, but just see if Open Lands, that way we gave them a plan. That way it's on their shoulders.
I think they will respond back and go, this is tentatively something you may be able to do. Give us your complete plan when you're done and we'll say yes or no.
How do we get out of this
Only
loop?
because that's what happened with Wagner.
How do we get out of this loop? Because it's been in this for years.
We just have to design something and send it to them. We just need to decide what we wanna do. I think there are
Because we've had multiple
clearly
in-person tours of that property now.
Yeah, and I think it's It's tough, it's a very restrictive conservation easement.
Yeah, how do we get past that point?
We just have to, we have to design and propose something.
So do we have to get that in the budget for next year, or?
I think it depends on what we wanna do. You know, opening up as an off-leash dog area and walking trails, we don't need to design for, I think.
Yeah, and a loop trail, we could start there, right?
There's already an existing trail, the conservation easement, I think, generally prohibits any new construction of trails or vehicle access or anything outside of what's already there. I think trails with the approval of Colorado Open Lands can be installed, soft surface stuff. Again, I think the other concern that everybody has is the public safety side of it.
Right.
You've got all these unattended buildings out there, they're way out at the edge of town, they will be unmonitored in most cases when it's open to the public. And they also create all these visibility issues from the roadways, there's all kinds of nefarious stuff that can go on there and it's kind of hidden. I think
Well, you
that's
could say that
true,
with-
that's true of a
yeah.
lot of places,
You
but they
say
don't
about the
typically
bike
have.
park, you say about the reservoir too, I
They
think.
don't typically have like 3 large buildings, a house, a large building, a townhome, 2 garages, you know.
I can't see what's going on with
there's all that
reservoir
extra
unless
stuff.
I'm there. I think some of this we could really work on, and I think we've talked about fencing in front of it too, to just block those structures off.
Yeah,
so
and I
that's
mean, I think
legal.
that those are the kinds of alternatives I think we just need to decide
Do
on.
we do staff housing out there, or is there any
I
staff
think, I
that's-
mean, I've said it before and I still think it is very difficult for us to be a residential landlord. We don't wanna, it's especially difficult with staff.
Yeah.
Who are
Well, can't
not,
trust
who are
each
not,
real estate agent, you
who are
can
not contract
manage.
employees, right?
Well, I didn't wanna get too, it's killing me that this is just going in circles, not at all that this is on port or staff, I'm just trying to figure out where this is getting held up, so it sounds like it is back on us. They want
They want us to
specific
propose
detail,
a plan
not
and-
just an
and
overhead
then we
view.
need to decide how we're gonna deal with the buildings.
Okay,
Those are the 2 things I think that are really at issue. What are we gonna do with disc golf? Are we gonna do off-leash dog park and trails? And what are we gonna do with the buildings?
do you think it'd be beneficial if we just had Open Lands come here and we have a conversation, or could I?
We've gone to them and met with them in person, so I mean, it will only be helpful once we have a clear plan to provide to them.
Okay, so maybe
It
if I
should
put
be-
under my reports here that we get this on the agenda to get that plan by August or September, is that a possibility?
I think we just need to decide what are we gonna do with it.
Yeah, to have that conversation,
Yeah,
or have Port have that conversation, I think that would make sense.
They've already given their top 3 and it's just kind of up to us to decide those things.
And that was the dog
It was
park,
dog park and
disc golf.
slash open park and disc golf.
disc golf,
Yeah,
which is
those are
what I thought too, that we were kind of pursuing, okay.
Yeah, or a combination, right? If we could get a combination where it is like an off-leash dog area, but you can also play disc golf, that was fine. But those were the 3 choices that they specifically
Yeah,
said.
and I think those make a ton of sense.
And to be honest, I think
The low hanging
the
fruit.
easiest way to use that property is to demolish the existing structures and create a big open space park.
Yeah, it sounds like that's not a possibility, right?
No, it absolutely is. I think everybody's hesitant to demolish valuable structures, large, expensive, valuable structures. And so I think that's just the only holdup is that everybody's kind of been like, well,
If they did that,
know.
would they let us put a parking lot in, cause that'd be new construction, so.
I thought we had this
We can
conversation.
ask.
Envelope.
We
You
can
can use
ask
the,
it,
you
yeah.
can use the envelope, so
Within-
if we
within
tore
the
down
building
that
envelope.
giant barn that's
You
there
put a
and
parking
moved
lot
it, we could use the envelope for something
Yeah.
that's already there.
We could likely propose to them that we put a parking lot where that existing building envelope.
So those
is.
structures are not protected?
No.
Oh, that's a problem,
So-
okay, or we fence them off
Not-
and then
not that I
staff can keep
recall.
using
I
them.
guess I shouldn't declare that, it's been a while since I read
From
it.
what I
Could
understand
we
from
dismantle
the
and
report,
rebuild?
the structures themselves, we can do whatever we want with the structures, we just can't build more that's not in the existing building
Building
envelope.
Correct.
Okay, well, and is it anything preventing us off the top of your head from just fencing those off, so it is only open to staff for storage?
No, only that, again, I think there's a likelihood that they'll get vandalized or broken
Yeah,
into
that-
periodically and right now they don't get vandalized or broken into because nobody's allowed back there.
Yeah.
But as soon as it's open to the public and there's a whole lot of people in there and we have valuable equipment stored and it's unmonitored other than just maybe some cameras.
Well, maybe there's a hybrid, that some of those don't.
There's a chance that will occur, I'm not saying it's
Yeah,
going
right.
to, but yeah.
I think some of it could be mitigated, some of those could be removed, some of them seem to have a storage use and a fence would help out.
Mhm.
So where do we go here now? Should I asked to get on the agenda for a joint meeting with Port? It sounds like Port
I
already
think
gave
town
us-
staff can just bring you a proposal, and I think we already know what we would recommend. Whether or not you'll agree, that'll be up to you guys, and we'll just bring you something.
Yeah, whatever Port's recommendation, it should be coming to us.
Mhm.
Does that work?
Uh-huh.
I had another one too. The Arboretum we had in the budget, it sounds like there is a joint meeting in June?
I think June, end of June,
That's awesome. I'm so stoked about that.
end of June, beginning
It's
of
gonna
July.
be awesome.
I might be in the back of that meeting as an excited citizen.
Yeah, the
Actually, they're online.
the first pictures of options looked really nice.
Awesome, I'm so stoked. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to pass you. Trustee Murphy?
Pretty brief tonight. Thank you to everyone that got the resolution added to the agenda for tonight.
Thank you, staff.
Yeah. Beyond that, I sent an email back and forth on kind of getting the water master plan listed on our website. I saw that. I appreciate that.
Oh, great.
And then as for an FAQ draft page, you know, I feel like the water idea could be a model for other, you know, issues that are frequently coming up and stuff. So whenever you guys get a draft, certainly appreciate that as well. And my last comment was kind of related to Trustee Ayers, you know, comment on, you know, making citizens aware of what ordinances and code we have in place. Leash laws or leash rules are, you know, one area we could tackle with, you know, social media posts. But I've heard, you know, how many chickens can you have? What are golf cart rules, you know? And, you know, it'd be helpful, I think, to just have like a social media kind of splash rather than like I do, which is here's our code, you know, go look it up, you know.
Then they get called liar.
Best part
So-
about it, man.
I don't know if that's something we could regularly do on social media. I think that'd be really helpful,
That's all I do, I just go find the code, I get the link, I paste it and say, here you go.
you know.
Yeah, but I see your point, Trustee Murphy. If we have a staff doing this posting already, maybe we'd pick some of these high visibility stuff.
Yeah.
Golf carts are one, and say, hey, here's
Anything
a June
that
issue.
comes
It's
up.
about carts.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, something brief that just kind of gives a rundown of like what our general kind of idea of rules are, you know, and here's your link for further reading,
Here's your
you
link,
know.
here's your sign.
Just a thought.
Yeah. I think it's fine.
That's all I've got for tonight.
Thank you. Trustee Hardy?
Nothing. Nothing.
All right.
Tired.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just two questions, I guess, for staff. Broadband update and project tracking update. That's kind of it in terms of stuff for me.
Yeah, we've started building a project tracker and Smartsheet. I think it will work. So we're kind of running through that. Right now, there's about 60 projects on that list. And so I think that'll be something we'll be able to present to you in the next month or so and show you how that'll work. I also think it'll be an opportunity to use Smartsheet, a separate Smartsheet for tracking board items. Actually will be relatively easy to do. It allows you to actually even submit forms for requests, and I think that there's ways that we could utilize that creatively in that instance. Your specific question about schedule was,
Oh, no, the broadband.
oh, broadband. We have that tentatively scheduled to come back in front of you. Sorry, I should have the calendar open.
You just had Smartsheet, it's like right there.
I still would have had to open Smartsheet, so I'm just opening a dumb sheet
Oh,
in Excel.
Yeah.
I'm still writing with a pen over here, man.
We've got broadband on May 9th.
nice, okay.
When is Ludlow?
Ludlow
we should probably
master
clear that one
plan,
out.
neighborhood master plan rezoning and public hearing was rescheduled or continued to April 25th, your next meeting.
And
April
Harvest
25th.
Harvest 47 will also be on the 9th.
So LM will be a big one. Okay, sorry, that's unrelated.
Yeah, Harvest 47 will be on the same night as broadband. I don't think that will be controversial.
That's all I have.
Okay, cool. We had the congressman woman out to Berthoud last week. It was a very interesting thing. She fielded, it got really controversial, unfortunately. I think some people kind of planned to come in and ask her questions about Venezuelan oil and anti-vaccination stuff. And so
Oh.
staff tried to relocate her to another table, and then it got a little more ridiculous. She handled it very well, and absolutely any political opinion is welcome there, and nothing to do with the town. There's nothing we can do about it. But she handled it very well. So going forward, I don't know there's much we can really do about that. She's kind of that's her own office. But Lynn was there, and I think there were some people there generally trying to hear what's going on. It just didn't have an opportunity. So I don't know, maybe one of these times she's gonna try and do it quarterly or something. We could just have her at the rec center and some refreshments and somewhere we have a little bit more ownership that, it was at Coffee House, so it's hard to say you need to leave. It's a place that's not even yours, but at the rec center or here, we could say you need to be respectful or you need to step out. I mean, there's probably some valid points there, just the people there were not asking questions, they were making statements, and so it was just not constructive.
Did you hear about the Longmont meeting? There was they were changing their meters over to radio controlled meters, so you could actually drive by and catch changes in like water usage.
Yeah.
And 16 plus citizens took up their 3 minutes apiece talking about radio frequencies and free radicals in water, which was fun to hear about through the thing. Anyways, when you brought that up, I'm like, oh yes, that type. Got it.
Yeah, and I don't want to discourage it. I mean, I think that gentleman did a big thing in the others to attend. It'd be nice if they formulated his questions. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. It was great to have her in town. And I really look forward. Do we know when we're gonna hear back from our micromobility, from our discretionary funding on her part?
Yeah, I don't have a.
We don't know.
a date certain.
We don't know.
No, they reached out and asked some questions.
Good.
It's not a bad sign, but
Do you know they'll tell us either way, or should something I need to follow up? And
no, I believe they'll tell us either way.
Yeah, that's exciting. My only other thing was driving over the I-25. We were kind of pushing Chris, Administrator Kirk, you and I years ago to have a trail on the side. Room for a trail, I think, is what it turned out to, but it looks so slim, and I don't want to trespass to get underneath to look at that bridge. I'm wondering if there's a way we get staff or someone out there to look if they've really followed through with this new bridge, if there's room.
They've sent me photos in the past, and there's a fairly significant amount of room. I haven't actually personally been down there, but they did send me photos, and it looked like there was a lot of space.
Great.
So
that's my only concern.
But I'll add it to our little list to follow up, and that's easy enough for us to do.
It's like 20. I don't know what traditional should be. I know we fought pretty hard, and then they ended up coming back. I think we did some good work there. I don't think they were considering us, and then it turned into now Division of Wildlife says it needs to have wildlife corridor, but then that could be interpreted into anything. So I just would want to take a look at that.
True. Yeah.
When are they gonna open up the right lane southbound on that roundabout?
Right lane southbound on.
It's still blocked off. You still gotta go into the roundabout and then turn it.
To get onto the interstate?
It seems like they've completed both roundabouts on the other side of the interstate, but that right southbound entrance is still blocked.
I could talk to Heather about that.
Oh yeah. I know the way. It's where you come around and then you have to go underneath, and they've got all sorts of
Right there in front of Love's, the corner on Love's.
Yeah, sure, Kirk, do you know?
It's not done.
No.
Like, everything was going gangbusters, and then they oh, we'll finish that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need a couple more days.
I haven't spoken to CDOT about the I-25 project in a few months. So.
You could have Ava come and just do an update again.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I don't know, we're pretty crammed right now with stuff.
She's always been really accommodating.
Speaking of CDOT, any railroad crossing or any other such between now and the end of the known universe, it might happen? Okay, just checking.
Oh, that brings a good point. Thank you. So our Lucas standards, are we still on the typical Lambert County one, right? That's the standard, right? But we haven't had any discussion about using the Fort Collins Lucas alternative.
Our code already allows us to use the standard.
Because that has some specific language on underpasses for pedestrian access. So Carl's questions about 287 would be answered by our standards.
Yeah.
So if Prairie Star came in now, they would be required to have an underpass, a pedestrian underpass, because it's considered a highway.
I don't know the answer to that question. I have to look.
Okay. But
I don't think even under the Lucas standards, they would be required to put an underpass under 287.
no, that's why I want to clarify, because the Fort Collins one. So if you're saying that the Fort Collins one is allowed, Fort Collins does require that. I clarified it with the bike and ped collaborator.
Oh, based on like a subdivision size or a,
That's a good point. Good
yeah, I
point.
mean, I think there's gotta be some caveats in there, it'd be.
Yeah.
But,
Probably with the size of that, and then it was also, yeah, not any street, it was like a highway or something.
Yeah.
I could get that from them, but that would be great, cause we have some big developments coming in, and if we have this ability, then yeah, they need to have these underpasses.
Yeah.
Even on, even on County Road 17 maybe. That is all I can think off the top of my head. Oh, that hearing was great, and Trustee Ayers, I appreciate you pulling that off of consent tonight. And it was something, at least from my perspective, I don't know about you, Trustee Murphy, but you're hearing all the people, the proponents, and it's like, gosh, I could easily put myself in their shoes, and it's a really complex bill. So definitely not straightforward. I appreciate you pulling that out of there. So we'll see where that goes. I got open records requested yesterday by Colorado Public Radio for emails to the state. I think they wanted it, anything I talked to the senators about, and I didn't, so they got no information off that, but they're probably coming out with some kind of article on that hearing, and we'll probably have another opportunity when it goes to the House too. And that's all I have. I'll turn it over to staff.
Just two quick things from me. Just a reminder and one, a thank you for everybody that's RSVP'd, yes or no, for the town board dinner with the Thompson School Board next Wednesday. I think I got RSVPs actually from everybody in here, I think. But if you haven't, just double check. You can just respond to the calendar invite with a yes or no, that's fine. And we just need that by Friday so they can make sure they have enough food. And then in the microtransit realm, Brian and I had an opportunity to go down and tour the Lone Tree Link on Demand service. They're the first, one of the first microtransit turnkey services in Colorado.
Lone Tree, the town, the city?
Lone Tree, the city,
Yeah.
where they're partnering with a third-party provider for a totally turnkey microtransit service. We rode it 3 times while we were down there to go to different places, from their transit stop to a restaurant to have lunch, over to our meeting at City Hall, and then back to the transit stop. It worked great. It was awesome. It was free to the public.
It was like a minivan.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome.
All branded and ADA accessible and everything. It was really super cool. And we got a lot of awesome information from Lone Tree about their service, how they set it up, the RFP process they went through, what's working, what's not, how significant of an impact it's had, and increasing ridership, and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, it was really good info, and it'll help us as we kind of formulate the next plan, especially if we do get our congressionally directed spending request funded. And if not, we also met 2 weeks ago to talk about 18 different grant sources that may be available to help fund microtransit implementation. So it would be super unique. Longmont is also considering microtransit through a third-party provider, and so we have a lunch meeting set up with them to talk about what kind of partnership opportunities might exist, if any. So anyway, there's a lot of good momentum going there, and just want to let you know that that's going on.
Has there been any updates Longmont RTD? I know years ago they wanted RTD to send a rail out there, and then RTD
Yeah, I don't
buses
think that's gonna
instead.
happen. Actually, a lot of the conversation that we had was about how many agencies that are in the RTD district are trying to partner with RTD to provide service because RTD is not doing it efficiently.
So, yeah, the Northwest Rail, there was promised on a ballot measure, and then RTD never delivered it, so Longmont essentially paid more money for nothing. And then a book came out called Train to Nowhere. And the RTD director is on our Front Range Passenger Rail Board, and she's very, very good. They got her from a huge California transit organization, BART, actually. And she's very cognizant of the problems that has created. And I think informally what RTD is trying to do is to use Front Range Passenger Rail to fulfill that requirement, and saying, hey, here's your opportunity to really get rail.
Okay.
But yeah.
So technically
Technically they get rail, but it's not as what they, and they'll have to pay more for it.
Okay. Alright, alright.
That's it for me.
Okay, Attorney Smith?
Nothing, and especially given the hour.
Well, yeah, and I thank you guys both for coming out.
You bet.
Long drive home. Okay, we
But
will,
we will stay.
you'll stay? Okay.
If you'd like us to, that I think was what
Is
you-
that expect, yeah, sure.
Yes.
Makes
Mhm.
sense. You don't have to both stay, but if you'd like to, it's great.
Yep.
Okay. Yep, so we'll do executive session and possibly come back there. Anyone like to move us into executive session?
I will move to enter into executive session pursuant to CRS section 24-6-4024F for discussion of a personnel matter and not involving any specific employees who have requested discussion of the matter in open session, any member of this body of any elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personnel policies that do not require the discussion of matters personal to particular employees. And the following details are provided: Town Administrator Annual Evaluation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, trustee has moved, trustee Murphy has second. Clerk, I just want a clarification, we will be coming back, sorry, not. Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
trustee Murphy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Ayers,
Yes.
Mayor Karsman.
Yes. All right. Order, we are taking no action tonight on the town administrator's contract, only because we want the full board present to discuss this. So I'm gonna go ahead, we will essentially extend this to the next meeting, same conversation. Other than that, I'm just gonna adjourn the meeting. Great.